Billiken fans and apparently FC Cincinnati fans. I don't know. Welcome in. Well, technically, it is welcome back to the SLU Twitter Think Tank 2023. We've got West Pine Bills in the house. We've got Carter Chapley in the house. Still hanging on to his Billiken fandom. I love to see that. Not often you find a guy who goes to grad school and finds his team there. Usually it's only the undergrad that leaves the impression. So of course though, I'm also joined by Peter Hale. And of course I am Zach Miller. What's up guys? How we doing? West Pine?
I'm doing great. Good to be back here. Probably the first time I've done any podcasts since the last time we did it because myself and my partner on the account are procrastinators and never podcast.
Chap Daddy, what's going on, bud?
Oh, well, to be clear, I went to a school without a Division One basketball team in undergrad, but we were the 2018 NAIA national champions. So, uh, while I don't talk about redacted university, I am committed to SLU for the long run.
That's all we care about. Pete, it's good to talk to you again. One extra time you have to deal with me this week.
It's a bonus, Zach. I couldn't make it a whole week this week. I needed this little midweek snack.
just this just got awkward. Now, so we are here to touch on everything that is Billiken sports. Obviously, the majority of our listeners are here for the basketball, but yeah, I think people or anybody, where do we want to start? Because we're at a point where I really don't know I don't know what to think about the basketball program. I don't know what to make of, you know, the athletic department on the um on the office side as opposed to, we've got women's soccer, men's soccer making the NCAA tournament almost yearly. Women's basketball has seemingly turned around. I don't even want to say turn around because they were good under Lisa Stone, but has turned a corner in just less than a year. Man, there's a lot to be just conflicted on, guys.
I think we start with expectations for men's basketball because that's really been if I were to fundamentally like strip down all of the arguments of the offseason into one word, it really comes down to expectations. Whether you're using the 20 win comment from Chris May that was so divisive, or more recently Ford saying they want to win more than that this season, right? So I think we need to kind of start with what are our expectations for the program, what are our expectations for this season, and what should expectations in general be for the program.
Well, and I think a point of distinction and something that's come up a lot on Twitter just before we dive into this is the very complicated nature of macro versus micro expectations. So a lot of us have definitely gotten into it, arguments online with fans about how you evaluate this coming season, which let's call a spade, is pretty much an unknown. Travis Ford at Media Day said, when you have 8 new players, it's hard to really know how good you are. I said it a different way, but you get the gist. But so it's very hard to know what to expect for this season, and I'll get into my personal ones in a minute. But as a whole in the program, you have to look at SLU's expenditure on their primary revenue sport, the fact that their head coach is in his 8th season at the helm, and the fact that he's the highest paid coach in the conference, which you cannot uncouple from everything. So when you look at a program investment, I don't think it's a stretch to say that the expectations should rightfully be high for this basketball program relative to the mid-major landscape. But I think the more interesting conversation is what we expect for this season specifically, which might not align with the expectations that we have for the program as a whole.
Right.
It's also a matter, though, like to Travis's credit or defense, which, trust me, I don't think you're going to hear me doing a ton of that, though I do give him credit where credit's due in that, like, his comments at Media Day were about how other teams voted for SLU in the preseason poll. Generally, it was about like how anybody can expect, like, how can you possibly know how good we're going to be? So it seems as though, like, and this is, I might be too nuanced here, is that like my expectations for like what I expect of a successful program versus my expectations of like what I expect this team to behave like. I expect Travis to continue to be competitive. I expect him to not like lay off the gas, even though like it's a weird year. Like I hoped it, I would be extremely disappointed if what you see this year is a team that's like not creative, not trying to be innovative, or at least evaluating what they have, and just try and do the same thing we've seen for 7 years, which I think, as we'll get deeper into this, we can talk about that a little bit more. But like I guess my only expectation for the group this year as a team and not as a coaching staff is to see a team that like wants to compete, because I think we've all kind of seen that as a thing that we want more of from, I don't know if the last generation is correct, but we're now like, I feel like we're 2 generations removed from the Jordan Goodwin era, and I think everyone wants to get back to what that looked like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think when you say you want to see a team that is competitive, I mean, I mentioned this to Zach in the most recent episode and maybe even the week before, where I was like, I'm approaching the season without the burden of expectations. I said a lot more people out there are a lot more
Yeah.
Anxious or upset than I am, whereas I'm willing to let this season kind of wash over me and just watch them play, try to enjoy it as much as I can. But you're right, there needs to be a sense of competitiveness, because those last 2 seasons under Jim Cruz, there was just nothing, right? Like it was not just like, okay, they're going to take their lumps now while they're young and the roster's turned over. It was like, no, there's no hope for this current iteration of this program, and something needs to be like it was a completely different vibe than they're out there giving it their all. And so that goes a long way to me. Now, how many wins that actually means for this season, I have no idea. Like,
Yeah.
we were talking about the Ken Palm predictions the other day and how it had us 9-2 in the 11 games that we know, not including the 2 other Myrtle Beach games that we don't know yet. And I told Zach I would totally take that. I would be happy with that. Meaning, like, we only lose to Drake and NC State on the road and beat everybody. 100% I would take that and be happy with it. 9-9 in the A10 would be a little tougher to swallow.
I guess I don't even mean like score lines in terms of competitive. Like I hope that's good, but like if you just see a team with apathy, that means the entertainment value that you're talking about, like those last 2 years with Cruz, is just like gone. Like I expect to see a lot of Larry Who's Jr. type behavior that we saw last year. Just like that's what I want to see from an entertainment standpoint. But
yeah,
I might be getting too nuanced.
Yeah,
here.
I think that's the thing. Like, it bothers me. I think when people talk about, oh, we want to be competitive, and it's not a shot, but it always rings like, I don't know. I don't want to go into like way off track, but when there's just these words in our kind of lexicon, you know, screw it. When people say something like a living wage, nobody ever explains what that means, right? What that all goes down. And I think competitive falls under that category, in that, like, what does competitive mean? And you kind of got to it where you're talking about like a team that's not apathetic, but, and that's fine. And I agree.
Like if they lose every game by 2, like they're competitive in every game, but they don't look like they care, like I'm going to be really disappointed. Like
right.
that's
not like was it the Blues versus the Kings the night before they fired Mike Yeo? Like that, like just rim the puck around the boards and nobody goes and chases it. Yeah. That right there is a sign that like this program is past, gone.
Yeah. Well, and I think just kind of pivoting off of that, because I echo those same sentiments about, effort, apathy, program investment, all that stuff. I think that's bare minimum. Again, going back to
agreed. Yeah, agreed.
I think that is like bare minimum. If you don't have that, I mean, just pack it up, you're done. But I do think from just a personal thing, because Yeah, Pete, I'd agree. Like if they're 9-2 in the known games, like okay, I'd be happy with that. I think that isn't going to come to fruition, and this non-conference is very bad. I mean, this is a bad non-conference slate. Do not fool yourself into thinking that this is
Sure.
and I know the things that they laid out and why, but I think they should have been willing to go on the road more. Season ticket holders be damned, but whatever, not my place.
Yeah,
I'm
we've
not a
already
season ticket
pissed
holder.
off. We've already pissed off enough season ticket holders with the results the last few years. Just roll with it.
I mean, if you're going to lose a big game at Shea Fitz, do you really want to be there? I say that tongue in cheek, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I would say for this team specifically, an evaluation criteria I'm going to have is like, I love guys like Gibson Jimerson and TJ Hargrove, and it seems like Tim Dalger is going to be a pretty likable guy. But if those three guys and Mike Meadows, like if those four guys are the ones that carry you to some level of respectability this year, and you're getting nothing from your young guys, I'm going to be honest, I don't really care. At the end of the year, if like a couple of these young guys that are here beyond this year are not like one of your three best players, I'm out. If you have so many young guys, and if you're gonna let a bunch of fifth-year seniors carry you to a level slightly above mediocre, that doesn't give me a ton of optimism. So whether it be Kirchich or Van Busel or Bruce Young or I mean
Kellen
anyone,
freaking Thames,
Kellen
Medley.
Thames, Sincere Parker, Medley, if some of these guys, Larry Hughes, like if some of these guys are not your primary contributors and helping you win games down the stretch, I think this year's a big failure. I mean, in no uncertain terms, because Mike Meadows won't be here next year. Dalger won't be here next year. Jimerson will not be here next year unless he gets a doctorate. Like,
are we sure?
He seemed pretty definitive at media day that he's getting his MBA and then he's out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
how you evaluate that, I don't really know. Like,
by the way, I think we learned that how the NIL worked with Gibson Jimerson.
Oh, his internship?
yeah, his Shafitz, probably the most expensive internship in the Shafitz group history.
I mean, do we want to speculate on how much that internship paid? I mean, was it more than I'm making now?
I wouldn't even know what to guess, to be honest with
That's
you.
the thing. That's the thing about like the NIL space is like I really just have no clue what like the number to like ballpark is. Like I know what like for example, I know what the example of like a league minimum in MLS is now because it's my job to know that. But like, what is the standard operating? What's the standard agreement, so to speak, at each level?
So Troy did throw out some figures on his radio interview earlier this week. How accurate those are, I don't know how accurate they are. I do, and I did share with you guys like definitively the Billiken Victory Fund offer to a guy in the transfer portal that ended up not coming to SLU. He might be playing at Memphis, might not be. But that's the only frame of reference I have that was, again, a number that felt wildly high for the caliber of player that it was. But all this stuff is just hearsay until you actually see some contract or something. I know UMass RJ Luis had allegedly signed like a 2-year, $60,000 NIL agreement with their collective, but he then transferred to St. John. So I don't really know.
I think I turned the corner on players as employees. I think it's the great equalizer of NIL. Like I think
we're going down that road.
I think right now that like NIL is it's going to be funny because I think what did I say? SLU was behind but ahead on one trend recently. I don't remember what it was. Pete, maybe you can recall that. Like they were so far behind, they were actually ahead because they were late to the party, and that was the right move, was to be late to the party. But like maybe SLU ends up being late to the NIL party to the point where NIL doesn't exist anymore, and we're just paying college kids.
You just have a bunch of W-2s that are like,
right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That would be hilarious.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So we're referring to Troy Robertson, president of the Billiken Victory Fund, who was on Kevin Slayton's show a few days ago, and he did mention that he didn't think the current model was sustainable, and I'm not sure I agree or I necessarily know where he thinks it's going. I mean, I think there can be shifts in market dynamics for sure, which is why I've been saying all along, like if given what Troy was saying, the numbers he threw out were 300,000 to 400,000 a year for a McDonald's All American level player out of high school.
I
It
think
was
that's
even
high. Do we? What do we think? Do we think that's high or low?
I think
I have no
that's
idea.
spot on.
Okay.
I
yeah,
think
I mean,
that's
I think it's about right. And then
because if you think about a McDonald's All American guy, they're top 24-ish in their
yeah,
domestic class, and they're most of those guys will be lottery picks after their freshman year. That seems like a pretty spot on statement considering what the rookie scale is for a lottery pick. It's just a year ahead of what it would be. So lop off, 25% of whatever the 14th pick in the draft gets, and I think you're around the figure he threw out. Because they're competing against the G League Ignite, they're competing against Overtime Elite, they're
Mhm.
competing against these prep factories that are glorified professional outfits.
yes.
I think Troy's right on that. It's more interesting that down market dynamic that is the space that SLU's going to be competing in. I mean, the days of us landing a top 50 guy I mean, they were slim to begin with, but they're dead. I mean, that's not happening short of Boeing tossing us $10 million to spend on a couple rosters.
It would
Fingers
have to be
crossed.
a local kid too. Like they're not just
Oh,
gonna like
absolutely.
jump
Yeah.
in. It would have to be like the next Tatum who comes through St. Louis. And
Yeah.
if there's enough will to like keep him home, it would be that's where the opportunity is. So I don't necessarily think we're just like out of it. I just think it's gonna depend on what's coming out of St. Louis. And then the other point I'll make about like the current market is he said it might be even more than that for a top level transfer because they're a proven commodity and
Mhm.
people know what they're capable of in college. And so you're seeing guys like, and that's probably to retain players as well. Think about all the guys at UNC who didn't go pro, for example. So you're probably looking mid high six figures on some of those guys, approaching a million, maybe, in some cases. Because he said like some of them were opting, and this isn't everybody, but some are opting not to go pro because it's more lucrative to stay in college for the last
Mhm.
year or two instead of just go on a rookie deal and then see what you can do, whether you're drafted or undrafted once you go to the NBA at 21, 22, 23, instead of a younger asset, as they might say in NBA drafts. So
Mhm.
those are kind of the market dynamics. But what I don't understand is why we seem to still be chasing transfers instead of, I think there's a lot more value. If transfers are being valued higher than high school players, when you get out of like the top 75 or 100 in high school, there's a ton of value there. Like you can build a
Mhm.
really good program if you're getting those guys for less money and then paying more to retain them. That's where you build your program.
Which he did say that they are not interested in doing, or is they're not interested in following the model of paying high school kids while they're in
They're,
high school.
I think they said they're
Uh,
prioritizing. Oh, sorry, Wes, go
No,
ahead.
go,
Well,
no.
he he did say so. There's that bit of Missouri legislation that allows
right.
once a player signs a national letter of intent with a Missouri school, I believe they have to live in the state too. I'm not 100% clear on that, but they can start capitalizing on NIL that's facilitated through their programs collective per Missouri state law. He said that they're not interested in that and that SLU had no involvement in that passing, which contradicts the release that came out of the state capitol. But that's something, and he specifically called out Mizzou and said like that's something they're doing, but not us. I
Yes.
think that's a poor decision to not leverage that unique piece of state legislation. If the conditions are right for a local kid that has brand value that you can start, again, and
E-
he brought up
Even if it,
return on
yeah.
investment, and it's very intangible for this stuff. I think we're years away from
Well,
actually having a good way to look at it as donors, but
that's the problem. Like, well, I guess like you're right. If you're getting into the NIL game, and this might be where Zach is right about like being so late to the party or early is that, like, if you're looking at NIL as a return on investment right now, you have to be willing to take risks. That's part of
Yes,
the whole
exactly.
deal. And Peter, to just kind of follow up your point, is why are we not prioritizing like high school players in that range? I would suggest looking at the roster and what the expectations are of the program. Yeah, I don't have to tell you this. You guys know this. Like, look at the kind of like the expectations of the program and where the coach is at his tenure, and tell me why they're looking to get transfers. It's because they want proven commodities. They're not looking. They I don't think they have the time to rebuild. They want guys to come in and play right away, and that's not what we're talking about here with 150 ranked plus high schoolers. Am I too far
Well,
off in that theory?
I don't think you're far off, but I do think strip away the current coaching situation and everything like that. I do think that there is always going to be hesitancy to say, hey, we're going to hand a 17-year-old kid $50,000.
Sure,
I do think there's a very natural dynamic to that, especially for, these collectives are run by people that either have money or manage
risk
large pools of,
averse.
yeah, you manage
Yeah.
large pools of money, which you don't accumulate unless you have some sort of business acumen. Um, I think there's some inherent risk to giving college age kids large sums of money in general, but gets less risky the older they are. I don't necessarily agree one way or the other, because I agree with you, Pete, that we should be looking in that, 150 to 250 range. You can build a really good program at the A10 level with those kids. And I do want to note, like, originally the class for this year had two of those kids between Medley, who thankfully is still being a Billiken, but also Brock Weiss, who looked like a kid who, hey, we might have something here in this
Yep.
Yeah.
outside of the top 100 range. He's going to go to Creighton. He's going to sit on the bench for a couple of years. No disrespect to Brock. It's just he's behind one of the best bigs in the country on a loaded front court, but he would have come here right away and played and probably made some decent change after a year. It's
Yeah.
just it's just kind of the
Yeah.
battle you're going to fight though with those kids is sometimes they blow up after the fall signing period, and people are always going to recruiting never stops, whether they're
Well,
signed or not.
I'm seeing so many commitments lately, 2024 commitments, before
Yeah.
a minute of high school ball has been played anywhere or college ball yet. Tons. Like I felt like this last fall too. I was like, wow, the class of 23 is committing earlier than previous classes. And I'm seeing that even more now in 2024. And no, SLU has not gotten on the board yet with any early commitments. We are a finalist for one guy right now, but I guess what I'm wondering is how many of those guys stay committed the entire year. You say recruiting never stops, and you're right. And given what we saw with Vice and even with CJ Nolan in a much shorter time frame as a transfer, it's I wouldn't feel too comfortable at all. If I'm a school that has 2 or 3 commitments right now, thinking the cornerstones of my class are already there. I really don't. Who knows what these teams look like in the spring? Programs with coaching change, power conference programs with coaching changes are going to have money to throw around, and nobody's commitments are safe until they sign.
Can't you take advantage of the Missouri legislature though, in that sense? Like, if you can,
That's
you
true.
you can start protecting some of your asset by starting the payments early and then having contractual agreements with. I mean, that's the thing.
But I mean,
We're
they
so
could,
on the cutting edge
you
of this. You can say, hey, if you transfer, you owe us this money back, or you put it all into escrow.
you
And
could, you could honestly, if you're a college kid and Mizzou's recruiting you, you could screw them over hard.
Yeah, but one thing I'm looking at, so Mizzou right now has the top. I know nobody wants to hear this who's listening to the show. They have the top ranked.
No, but it's a warning.
2024 recruiting class, and only one of them is actually playing in Missouri. So I don't know. I guess I'd have to go back and read that law. I think it was intended for in-state kids, but what's to stop Mizzou from paying them now if they want to?
That's like, how creative can you get in terms of operating a fund that provide like you can get into a real legal gray area. And fortunately, when you're a major state university, and I mean, there's a really great law school attached to our private university that can get really creative with how you work with this law, right? Like that's the whole. I mean, like I dare to venture that like these kinds of problems aren't being avoided at Kentucky.
What
And listen, their resources are bigger, but that's how you do it.
Yeah.
where can SLU, I mean, add, like I said already that they should have already hired an assistant director of athletics for NIL.
Mm.
I mean, do you add that as in like to like assistant athletic director and general manager and basketball general manager? Like, do you just go ahead and hire that role? And for now, they are an NIL kind of liaison. And then because they're already talking about how colleges are going to be able to, facilitate the NIL further. So you hire somebody who, can do NIL for now. And then once they move to the payroll, basically players on the payroll, then they turn into the basketball general manager.
Except
on.
like, don't coaches already think that they are that, like I can't imagine them being eager to hand over that responsibility. I mean,
They
coaches
kind of are,
control
though.
freaks.
Maybe. I mean, they are, but they could also just see it as a thing that like it's also a convenient way of tidying your like it's the equivalent of a bag man. There's a convenient.
it's just an above.
Yeah.
It's like a
man.
compliance position.
Yeah.
Well, so my thing is that like we can sit here and act like, hey, we're recruiting a guy. We text Troy and say, hey, what can we get for this guy? I think it's still Ford at the end of the day calling the shots. It's not the.
Would you say
it's not the collective?
So it's Travis Ford recruiting a guy. But what is he?
I think it's Travis Ford recruiting a guy and then saying, hey, can you take care of, I mean, can you get this done? Can you put together the package?
Or what's the amount? Isn't that what you were kind of saying, West Pine?
Like
yeah,
who's more in tune with the amount that it would take to win a player like that?
I would think that they're on the same page. I don't necessarily think it's one party has more information than the other. I think it's more so, hey, right now this is what we have in our war chest. We allocate it accordingly, but I think that I don't think it's as naive as like, hey, I haven't talked to the NIL collective in a couple of weeks. Let me open up my banking app and see what's in there. Like, I think it's, hey, this kid's coming on campus for a visit this week. Our funding status is this.
Yeah.
We quote unquote direct them to the collective, but I don't think there's this line of separation that the NCAA likes to masquerade that there is. There is no line. I want them to just get over the charade of
though. They're like
it's impossible.
Yeah.
How
you can't.
And like, so there's ongoing congressional hearings on NIL, and I think it's going to look different in 5 years. I want them to just end the collective model right now, bring it in-house for the AD. The AD distributes funds. The NCAA is going to petition hard for their antitrust exemption, so they don't have to treat them as employees and yada, yada, yada. And they'll have Title IX considerations, but they're trying to get an exemption for that too. Just bring it all in-house. Let's stop pretending that these are different entities. Like, they're very clear to say, oh, the collective is, it's not an arm of the athletic department. Just say that it is. Just end the separation. I don't care.
But I think with that, and the point, and I don't disagree with anything you've just said. It's that like I think when we're talking about like coaches ceding control, it's that like I would imagine when it comes to the nitty gritty of this, like coaches would love to just like, all right, this is the big picture. I'm going to hand this off to my, whatever the equivalent of my AGM. Like that's how it works in hockey, right? Like the GM handles the big stuff, and then the AGM like writes out a legal document, right? Like and manages the CBA and that kind of stuff. And so I think the point here and hiring an associate athletic director of NIL would just be able to like take this dumb little stuff off the hands of coaches, and I bet they would love that. I bet they would love to get rid of that.
It's like
that small stuff,
like what the men's soccer team has, or the soccer teams, and even the not single out soccer teams, but you look at all this, the programs that aren't fully funded, or, they
Sure.
don't, yeah.
They're
So
not
like,
headcount sports or whatever.
right, they have programs that handle the allocation of scholarship money. So I
Mhm.
mean, it would be the equivalent of that. But to my point really was, and you know, I will I will turn it over to, you guys to finish your points. But would SLU be better positioned if this was a an employee model, where it's all on everything's on the table, everybody knows the amount you can spend, and that's it?
I mean, I think from so with NIL, obviously there's the two components. There's the collective model, which it's not pay for play, but it is pay for play. It's reserved
Mhm.
specifically for student athletes at St. Louis University. That's it's an employment contract essentially. Just they can't restrict you from leaving. But there's also the actual true name, image, and likeness of where you can become a a spokesperson for Bommarito Auto or Two Men in a Garden or whomever you want to be your marketing vehicle of choice. I think that in terms of this pseudo NIL, which is what the collective model is and perpetuates, I think yes, it would make it easier for a place like SLU to have someone on a full-time salary who can work on fundraising, can work on payment disbursements, who can treat this like a true employee model where they're like an extension of HR and payroll and contracts and whatever you want to do. You can hire someone who's got a master's degree who can do all this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, do I think that like even that's the perfect solution? I don't really know because more money is still on the table because of all of this marketing stuff. I know they have the Billiken exchange. I don't really know how much it's leveraged. You guys would know better from being local, like how many SLU players are actually used in these agreements with local companies. But yeah, I think it would be better if it was in-house and it was an employee model. But that's going to get taken care of in the next 4 to 5 years, probably by congressional legislation. And I think that this is going to be forced, kind of like Troy was alluding to in his interview on the radio.
I don't know if it's better for SLU, but it's better for the athletes, and I think that positions most um, programs of SLU size
Yeah.
to prosper.
Well, and I think a lot of times when I say SLU, I don't mean the school. I mean the athletes,
Sure.
because I don't really care about the athletic department if you don't have the athletes. Like they're the thing that drives it. They're the product. But yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely better for the student athletes, assuming it's run competently, which
Like we're still in such a
TBD.
a fog of war over transparency about like what is and isn't an appropriate payment, what is and isn't
Yeah.
allowed. And so players get caught in a situation. Well, players can do it, but it goes both ways, right? But really what ends up happening is, from my experience, agents get involved, try promising the world
Mhm.
and playing fake or otherwise not real offers off each other and promising huge dollar values. We just talked about an All-American being $500,000. Well, oh yeah, well you're right there. You're a
Yeah.
70th ranked you deserve $250,000. And it's
Mhm.
like, who knows? And so
Well,
I think transparent. It's the same thing with like salary caps. I think of hockey as like the most interesting. Everyone knows what everyone makes. Everyone knows what's available, and so you can play the game of, well, what is that player really worth, and you know where you stand based on the rest of the picture.
there was a great article in CBS. I believe Matt Norlander wrote it back in July, and it was about NIL, and it was part of their anonymous coaching survey that they do every
Mm-hmm.
offseason. And one of their pieces focused on NIL, and a lot of coaches with the condition of I don't know, anonymous
Anonymity.
I can't speak.
Anemone.
Anemone.
A lot of those coaches, though, without putting their name on it, said, yeah, when I'm recruiting a kid, they'll throw out a dollar offer that they allegedly got from another school. And it's either the other school is lying to them or the recruits are lying to the schools themselves, but you have no way to verify these figures because it's not public. I do think, to your point, Carter, if you bring this in-house to the schools, I think there will become payroll transparency to some degree.
Yeah.
Because the state schools will have to publish that, because these athletes, at least their big ones, will be within a certain earning threshold, and it'll have to be disclosed publicly per their tax returns. I guess that's more of the private school concern, but you get my point. Eventually, this stuff would normalize, and it would be more like a professional model where you kind of have actual dollar amounts you're working with. I hope we get there one day. I think it would make it better for all parties involved. But
if we don't, we almost have an incentive structure where schools would maybe a coach that you're buddies with, you could call them up and be like, you're not actually offering this kid 75, are you? And you know, like somebody you're close with might say, no, we'd never give him over 45. It almost like a mini price fixing situation where it's just like,
definitely.
I would rather
These are the kind
just
of rabbit holes I'm excited to stumble.
Or
I
a
would
kid
rather
or-
just flat out call a coaching buddy of mine than get played by a 17-year-old who I know is lying to me.
Yeah. Or a kid puts out his final 3, and so the 3 collectives call each other and go,
Right.
all right, let's not kill each other here.
Yeah.
That I could see that happening sooner than later if it hasn't happened already.
That's incredible to think about.
Well,
Yeah.
I do know too, though, there are instances, and it was in another piece I read over the summer, of a school will throw out a dollar amount, or a collective, or whomever, and a kid will get there and they'll say, yeah, we're not paying you that. And
we don't have that. It's not there.
There's no real legal enforceability to some of these things, where they say the wording on it is such as you can earn up to this, and there's no minimum, and it's like, hey, so it's like it's a
So
crappy
they're not
bonus.
signing a contract. Right.
So they
right?
are, but the verbiage for some of them, and there's some very shady NIL agents out there, just from
it's like
people
you
we've
can
talked to
save
around
up
the
to.
conference.
It's like a sale.
Yeah,
It's like
you
a
can save
sale.
up to 15% on your car insurance, except
Yeah.
instead of selling you insurance now, I'm selling your future earnings.
And
at a
everyone kind of
school.
assumed that like there would be this like marketplace for like, oh, well, transparency will be the thing kids move to. Like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, like I'm signing you to a guaranteed contract. Yeah, no chance.
I mean, look, we don't have transparent salaries for like jobs. Like I can go on LinkedIn and look for a job, and I have no idea what it's going to pay until you go through an interview, maybe 4 or 5 times, then talk to HR and get an offer letter. Why would that exist for NCAA athletes? I mean, no offense, but they're 18 to 22-year-old kids. They're very easy to take advantage of.
Well, because the industry
from professional.
standard,
What'd you say?
the industry standard of sports outside of college, which we can all agree is like moving towards the pro model, right? Like it's impossible. It's a runaway train, right? The industry standard, like the MLS today released the MLSPA, not the league, the Players Association released their salary guide today. So you can go onto the website and see what everyone else is making in the league, and so you can find out what's everybody making. And so like the NHL, the MLB, the NFL, like it's all salary transparency. And if college basketball wants to keep up, unless they want to die to an expanded G League, which I think if the NBA was smart, they'd be licking their chops. Like, oh, we're gonna start a whole G League Ignite. That's just the start. Like we're gonna start a G League Ignite team in St. Louis and in Chicago and wherever there's a college team. That'll be your college team now. That'll be, and we'll pay them we'll pay them the exact same you are, but now you're at the
with
NBA.
professional amenities and coaching
And
staffs, and
we'll be transparent, and it'll be it'll be easy, and like there's a whole league here. There's a whole pro league here that exists across 360 something college basketball teams. It's a pro league. Like everyone's getting paid. Everyone has been getting paid for decades. Why should this be any different?
And that's kind of just my last real thoughts on NIL. I do always get a chuckle when people are saying like, "Oh, the game is tarnished now. The kids are getting paid." These kids have been getting paid under the table for years. It's just above the table now.
See, that's the funny thing is I was fully against like any sort of payment, and then NIL happened, and I saw the absolute nightmare that NIL is. And now I'm just like full on like let's get a salary cap in here. Let's regulate to high heaven.
Nobody loves it, but the problem with NIL now, and it didn't happen until what year did it finally go through? 2021. What was the first year that it opened up?
It was after the COVID season. I think it was after Goodwin and French were gone.
Yeah,
So,
they were not. They weren't
Yeah,
there
because
for
they
that.
didn't get
so my point is, we went through over 100 years of college athletics with them in an amateurism model where they weren't officially allowed to be paid.
Yeah.
Now we have a correction that's happening way too late. Like had all
Mhm,
along, had we never had this weird sham amateurism model, it wouldn't be anything that we're even worth discussing today. College sports blew up into a multi-billion-dollar business in the last couple decades,
mhm.
and now that they no longer can sustain a model of these kids are not allowed to get any compensation at all officially. um it feels awful for everyone, right? Like there's no clean way to rip the band-aid off and do this should have happened decades ago, if not longer. Like it's just like corrections are uncomfortable, and that's what this is.
So we're moving to basically the European soccer model of academies.
Yeah.
However, the academies are not owned by the professional teams. They are separate from the professional teams. And you know
That
what?
exists though in Europe. That exists in England. There are like organizations that don't see, that are not Premier League but have renowned academies that their whole operating model
Like the
is just
IMG, essentially.
well, essentially, but like their whole they play in the third division, but they go in when you're 9 years old, and then when you're 16 and you're any good, they sell you off to a second division German team. But their
Right.
return on investment is
Right.
they
But
sell
they're
you
still
buy,
professional clubs.
yeah,
Like,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. But like, I mean, but what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
all the
Zach's
staff
point
at
is
SLU is professional.
I
Everyone
think
who
Zach's
works at
point
SLU is
is
professional.
like I
Sorry,
think
West Pine.
no, it's fine. I think Zach's point is more like, okay, you have a professional club, but their
Mhm.
paycheck is being signed by the guy down the street. Like it's not you're not
Yeah.
like it makes no sense when you think about it.
Right.
I mean, at I don't know. I agree. There was no clean way to rip the band-aid off, and this could have been avoided if the
Well,
NCAA would have
that's
instituted some
Yes.
form of national guidance and not said, hey, states, figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
California wrote that bill,
mhm.
and then the NCAA was forced to say, well, shit, people in California can make money now, and we don't have a leg to stand on in court, so I guess we have to let every state make an agreement. I mean,
It would have been a clean rip if the NCAA just like took charge of this and reinstituted themselves as a genuine, because right now they're not a thing. Like the NCAA isn't
The NCAA is a
they,
tournament.
isn't an organizing body. They run a tournament.
they
Yeah.
they sponsor they sponsor postseason tournaments, provide officials to the conference, and provide like rule oversight. That's it.
But like
That's
but
it's
what
the
are we doing with
least
the
influence they've
In-game
ever
rule
had.
oversight. Not
yeah.
let's
Yeah, like they don't
Yeah.
even run the college football. They don't run the college football playoff. They don't run the college. The only thing we actually tune in, like the reason we tune in to watch anything in their biggest sport, they're not even regular. It's not their thing. But like we're essentially dealing with an organization that decided to write their own death note by saying, "Hey, you know what we're going to do? Not get involved in our biggest product, the NCAA tournament," which is like,
Which
what are
guys,
you, what
it's
are you
been
nuts?
50 minutes and we haven't even got into the list of shit. This is fucking awesome. I don't know why we don't do this 3 times a year. I'm not gonna lie.
three
This is
times a year would
incredible.
fill 52 weeks of content for your podcast.
Oh
Not even
So
joking there.
What do we
no, I
need?
don't want you guys to stop.
Oh no,
I was
I
just
can talk.
pointing out.
This nothing infuriates me more than the so like the intersection of sports and business is my fascination. If I could get paid for that, I would. I would not work a corporate job that
T
keeps
Rob
food on the
call him.
table.
I know a guy for you.
Hey, I would love to. My thing is though, nothing makes me more mad than the NCAA because they functionally do not serve a purpose and now are trying to wrestle back any modicum of control that they can get because they were too lazy to write legislation
Right.
20 years ago.
They should
Now
have
they're
just they should have
they are
just said
lobbying Congress. We have wasted $2 million in public funds so senators can hear arguments about NIL and stuff and try and dunk on Charlie Baker. Like, this is not a good use of anybody's time or taxpayer dollars.
No, it's
this
embarrassing.
could have been avoided if they would have instituted a salary cap and said, hey, you have to be transparent about what you're paying these players under the table. We know you're fucking paying them under the table. So start you anything you get paid, it's now taxable. Screw you all.
They could have
have
done this years ago when the money was smaller. I mean, the money.
Oh yeah,
when like in the 80s,
Yeah.
college sports was small. The money was little, and like the guys getting paid under the table. You're talking about like a car here and there. It wasn't like
What was it?
crazy amounts of
Was it
money.
Trans Am Dupree? Marcus
Like
Dupree, the Trans Am?
when you see that start to happen, get out in front of it and like take care of it. And but now here we are. Like no, they just couldn't stop. They couldn't stop. And here we are. And it's the correction, and it sucks for everyone. And I get the people who are kicking and screaming about it and hate it. There to me, there's no moral, ethical, logical argument against it whatsoever. I mean, people should be paid for their labor. That's very
the only
fundamentally
argument is
simple.
that I love college basketball the way it was before. And that's
when
it.
I
Like,
was young and impressionable,
Yes,
it was the
yes.
best it was ever.
But Zach, what's even funny, and like I
Back
know
when I
that's a
was
tongue in
30.
cheek. I know that's a tongue in cheek argument, but before the only fundamental difference is the bag of cash was under the table, and now it's above the
Yeah.
table. Like
How many times have I said this? I
He likes it
don't
better.
like to see how the sausage is made,
He likes it
people.
better.
But
Yeah.
you're not. That's the thing. You're still not even seeing it because it's not transparent. It's still
Well,
just
no,
like
but now it's an excuse. Now
Of
it's a
course.
reason why. Now it's a reason why we're not good. Now it's
Of
the reason why.
course.
Also,
I'm a
Yeah.
baby.
Why we didn't get
I'm a
that transfer.
petulant child.
Yeah.
this is buried. This is gonna be buried in 50 plus minutes of NIL bitching. NIL is not the reason that SLU has not had sustained success.
Correct.
I'm putting that on the table right now.
Correct.
All right, let's
Correct.
go.
Sorry,
ahead
before we move on to that one last thing, there's something to keep an eye on for those who are interested in this. Is that like in this sitting of the U.S. Supreme Court, Major League Baseball and its antitrust exemption are under review essentially from
it
the
is?
MLBPA. Yes,
Hell yeah.
because of the retraction of over 40 minor league teams.
Yeah.
It killed 40 businesses and took
Mhm.
away like 2,000 jobs or something crazy like
Man,
that.
Right.
You want to talk about a shitty operating model?
Yeah.
Minor league baseball.
It can't do it. So they're under I think it's sitting sometime in late November. But that model, the MLBPA, which now represents the minor league players union as well, has taken it. It's been accepted by the Supreme Court. And so that you were talking earlier about the NCAA looking for an antitrust exemption or maintaining an antitrust exemption. If that one falls, it's hard to see a precedent exist for any sort of minor league, which is how the Supreme Court would look at college basketball, college football, college soccer, college sports.
Yep.
They would see it as a minor league and would probably have to rule with precedent, and this would be the precedent.
And I do one other case to keep
I don't know
an
what
eye
the
on.
fuck you're talking about, but go off, King.
Legal stuff.
Yeah,
One other thing to keep an eye
exactly.
on is and I think it already is going up a level beyond where it normally would begin. Dartmouth's men's basketball team that just that's attempting to unionize. That would be another one that if they get that, it'll put a huge dent in that antitrust argument.
That's the way we get to salary caps. If you get every college basketball player to unionize and collectively bargain as one body.
Because right now they're making a hand over fist. If it goes to payroll, they don't want that.
It's also how you get video games. That's true. That's how you end up with the show.
Which there's a lot of
and that's really all West Pine Bills wants in this world.
Truly.
God. Well, so there are a lot of ongoing, as ridiculous as this sound, and yes, this is something I'm interested in. Next summer, EA Sports is slated to release their updated NCAA football game, and there's I think 6 or 7 ongoing court cases right now that are involving this exact issue of compensation for the players that are included in the games, and the NCAA trying as hard as they can to not collectively purchase rights, because then that would give some union legalese terms to it. So they're trying very hard to say we view all of these people equally, but they're not one entity, which is a very flimsy legal argument. But that's something probably in 6 months that'll be more relevant, and I'll rant about on Twitter for 3 years.
You're right. Zach. They're making money hand over fist. The high end ones. Unions are formed by the lower end employee. That's how unions gain their strength. That's how it's the people who play in the SWAC. It's the people who play in the NEAC. It's the people who play in the zero bid Atlantic 10. It's the volleyball. It's the
and I think
I can't wait.
Those are the unions.
I can't wait Actually, I think, and honestly, looking down the pipe here, and Pete, I do want to let you say one more thing before we get into the more Billiken centric NIL stuff. I mean, as soon if the basketball players unionize and then they become employees of the university, the whole model, like that's where you start to get into like the women's sports don't want that to happen, because if the men's basketball team unionizes, then the women's team unionizes, then you can't afford anything. And so you just have to cut women's soccer. You have to cut like that's what I see.
Title IX won't let that happen. But
can't.
yeah,
But that's
Title IX won't, yeah.
Well, but if
no, well, it'll mean everyone makes less. That's the thing. Is it will?
But you'll cut.
Yeah.
But then you, dude, it's a nightmare.
It's complicated. It's
there's
at the end of the day,
many,
it's complicated.
There's so many, but like it's only that you have to offer it. Right? You have to you only have to offer equal. So if you cut equally, you cut the men's scholarships. Like women's soccer and basketball would not suffer, but like a volleyball would suffer.
Field hockey,
would
tennis
foul would be first on the chopping block.
Yeah.
Well, tennis has equal players.
I mean, they could just slice both of them and just say
that's what I was saying, is that like they can literally, if they don't want to pay for women's soccer, they can just cut men's soccer. Now SLU won't do that because 10 stars on the jersey.
Yeah. But it is a thing that I don't really know with unionization, and also with NIL. Like, I do think it's a component of it has to be offered, but it's really that scholarship and like fund allocation is what matters more from the university itself. So I don't know. I'm not smart enough in Title IX to actually.
Also, that Dartmouth issue was one of the key reasons the schedule wasn't released.
It is. You know what's crazy?
Just FYI.
Like Ivy. So I always think it's interesting that like this union thing in the Ivy is of particular interest because I believe they don't get scholarships.
Nope.
In the Ivy League.
We may be the one team non-Ivy League with the most walk-on minutes this season. Most non-scholarship minutes.
That's a conversation for another day with partial information.
Yes.
I was thinking about that while walking my dog today. I was like, some of these big men that are walk-on.
We have a lot of big walk-ons, which is funny.
We have 4 walk-ons, 2 guards, 2 bigs.
The specific thought I had was this could be the most walk-on minutes since Aaron Hines started like 25 games.
Yeah. Pete, any last thing on NIL as a whole before we get into NIL and the BVF?
No, let's switch it over to SLU because now we're putting hypotheticals on hypotheticals when we're talking about unionization of field hockey. So I'm losing the thread. So let's bring it back down to earth and talk about what's happening right now.
All right, we went into one thing we got way deep into is the amount of money that a player gets commensurate with their ability level or recruiting ranking, whatever you want to say. How much annually does the Billiken Victory Fund need to have yearly to be at the top of the A10?
Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
I mean,
I have a guess in mind, and it seems like it's going to be high when I say it, but
because we're talking about a program that paid $0 2 years ago.
Yeah, so I think the number to be competitive. Well, let's not do competitive. Let's say if you want to be a top spender in the A10, I think between $500,000 and $750,000 annually.
That's not a number that shocks.
You think that's high?
No, I think that's about right.
I from what I understand, that the players that the Billikens have been recruiting on average, the number that was thrown out was $70,000 a year.
A person with like a variance of slot, right? Like maybe the top guy gets 100,000.
Let's say CJ Noland would cost you
in that range.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think that number doesn't surprise me at all.
Even
Yeah,
a
I
Brock
think
Weiss, a Brock Weiss or a CJ Noland would be.
I mean, like, Zach, plug your ears. Like, this is a how the sausage is made kind of thing. But like, I'm genuinely curious, and this is a thing in reporting the team and now doing it from afar. Like, how much was being spent before NIL was legal? Like, how does that figure differ from what we were already doing versus like what it could be over
Where
the
did
table? That's
and
the
what
math
I
I'm
want to know
curious
is where the money was coming from.
Oh, I think the same people. That's my guess.
That's the fun. That's
Total speculation. Like,
Yeah.
So 70 per player is 910,000 a year. And
But
that's
I would
actually
figure-
in the neighborhood of where I would think you need to be if you're going to be at the top of the A10.
I would figure though that really it's your top 7 or 8 that are getting that average,
huge money.
and then
Yes,
like
yeah.
your freshmen or your international guys that might have a little bit more difficulty that first 6 months of getting something. I would imagine that figure is lower, but when you think about like not even just top of the A10, like when the Billiken Victory Fund was announced, they announced 3 or 4 schools directly as comparables that they were modeling that this is who we want to be. And It was Dayton, Creighton, Butler, and Xavier. Or did I add a school in there?
No, you're right. Those are the 4.
And I can tell you from just people that we talk to around the college basketball sphere that those schools are in that range or a bit higher. I would say Dayton's on the lower end, Butler is on the lower end, but Xavier and Creighton are, they're fundraising and dispersing cash at a level higher than that $70K a man. And, I think if you're going to put those out as comparables, you don't compare yourself to the A10 with the exception of Dayton. If you think you're a Big East caliber athletic department, basketball program, fundraising arm, all that, whatever you want to say you are, then compare yourself against those Big East schools and say, all right, how do we get to that point? Because that's how you begin to progress forward, plus good coaching and, all the other stuff you have to do that you've always had to do. But, I think it's great if you're at the top of the A10. I would much rather be mid-level of the Big East, but that's a conversation entirely different.
My hunch is that, okay, so if you've got to be approaching $1 million to be at the top of the A10, you're probably 1 to 2 in the Big East, right? Like your DePaul is probably closer to the low end of that. Villanova is probably at the high end of that, just to kind of put the Big East in perspective. St. John's with a Patino, maybe.
UConn.
UConn, of course. Yeah, sure. So, but my hunch, and based on some other, off the record conversations I've had and stuff, is probably if we're looking at 900 for a high level A10 team, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 times that for a power conference football school basketball program. The kind of schools that are, landing the guys you're actually spending well into 6 figures on. So I think all of that math kind of checks out and makes sense. And you're right. Like if we've seen Creighton now take one of our committed recruits. We've lost head to head on at least 2 guys to Butler since NIL has come online. We've lost head to head to Xavier on at least 2 guys. Dayton, we have not lost head to head on, but they have a guy who just put them in his top 5 and cut SLU from his list. I think he was a Will Bailey recruit regardless.
Yeah.
But now we've seen that peer group. We have not beaten them for anyone, and we're getting beat by all of them.
We also got beat, not to cut you off, Xavier, Kachi Enze, who...
Yeah, well, I said Xavier's beat us head-to-head twice.
Oh, sorry about that,
Yeah.
because that one was interesting as a side thing. I won't say the number, but someone on the Billiken board did drop a specific number for that player that was eye-popping for if that was true, and we can talk offline about that, but because I agree.
At the time, it seemed like he really liked SLU. Like I was hearing really good things about his visit, and all of a sudden he was committing to Xavier.
The way,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, all of a sudden he was committing to Xavier and their new coach Sean Miller, and it was clear what was happening there.
Yep.
And so I appreciate the fact that they listed those as the schools we want to be competing with, because those are exactly the schools that I would see as like our peer comps, the schools that we want to be competing with, even if we're not all in the Big East together. That's still what we should be aspiring to. But it was clear that those Big East schools were ready to spend more right away than we were. And I don't know how much of that was our donor class was tied up in the Champions Center, or just isn't comfortable yet, committing a bigger amount to NIL. I mean, I think there's probably a few factors all at once, but it's very clear that we're just not there yet.
I wonder how much of that is like external factors, like the Big East is just bigger, like there's more competitive like reason to rally the troops than maybe some feel for the Atlantic 10, which is in a kind of weird spot right now, doesn't have the same national profile. I'd be curious to see, like, I'd be curious to have a conversation with someone who knows better how that impacts, like what's Marquette up to, like what are all of the former A10 schools doing in that sense, or former whatever the conference was that we used to play against, because like those donor classes probably aren't too dissimilar.
No,
Like
that's the thing. They're very similar.
They're all so similar.
I go to Xavier games. They feel like SLU games that are just better attended, in terms of like who's there.
And I think that's a good point, Peter. And it's something that Zach has harped on for years. I mean, I don't necessarily think that SLU does the best job for undergrads through their progression of their donor cycle of developing a strong affinity for their alma mater. I
agree completely.
My fiance, peek behind the curtain, she is a Butler grad.
What?
Now I like
You're
I love
kidding.
I love SLU. Clearly, I'm half of a not a podcast, half of a Twitter account that psychotically tweets about their alma mater. Like, I'm the exception, not the rule. I know like 50 people that she graduated with Butler from that have not that extreme online presence, but are like already donating to their athletics program, to their NIL. Like, they will, if any of them win the lottery, they're going to be cutting a check to their basketball team. Like, that kind of thing.
Yep.
I can't say I know many people from my age range that do that at SLU, because they just don't have as strong of an affinity for the athletics program.
I would have to think first. I would have to think long and hard about whether or not I wanted to cut a check to the basketball program, or I mean, I might at this point, and for external reasons, cut the check to volleyball, or cut the and for more on court reasons or on field reasons, I would cut it to men's and women's soccer.
Build a baseball stadium.
Yeah, I would do a baseball softball complex. I would
do
see if I could get other
put my
sports back
name
on
on
campus.
Yeah, and that's just kind of the overall point, right? Like, if we're going to benchmark ourselves against Big East schools, which I think is the proper thing to do, because I'm personally of the mindset that SLU is never going to make it to the Big East. I think that ship sailed, and again,
not in a way that'll be satisfying.
No.
Yeah.
In a way that we could be DePaul, which no one really wants.
Sorry,
or kind of a pity. Sorry about that, Carter.
Yeah, no. I think we're on the same wavelength. That like all of a sudden the Big East is like a whole other conference exists, because like UConn and they all go to do their own thing at different places, and then all of a sudden the Big East is like the Pac-12 in football or basketball, and it's like, well, you guys can come now, and it's like, no, that's not what I want. Like,
or if we decide to pull an SMU,
technically they did and try to invite us, and we didn't care enough.
Or at this point, we might have to pull an SMU and throw an obscene amount of money. Yeah. I know, but if all of a sudden Shea Fitz and a few other of the primary donors decided like, hey, there's a game of musical chairs happening, and there's 5 seats, and if we're not in one of these seats, then we just don't matter.
Would you be okay?
Then we're FBS football.
Would you be? I want to take a poll right now. All for it. Would you be okay if SLU forewent, I don't know, TV rights from the Big East for 5 years to get invited?
Yes.
Not my money. I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, definitely. But just circling back to...
Or NCAA money, for that matter.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes is the answer. Okay.
The long-term value proposition of that revenue sharing is... It's greatly better than 5 years of foregone, you know,
Yeah.
you forego
I was
$20 million
curious.
over 5 years and
That's
you reap the benefit long term. But my point being, to circle back to, like, you know, fundraising and all that, is, you know, if you're going to benchmark yourselves against these Big East schools, which I think is the proper thing to do because that's where you want to be, whether or not you reach it is another story. You have to figure out a way to engage a wider donor base.
Yes.
Period.
Mhm.
I mean, like, a good example, and it's old money, whatever, but like the O'Loughlin Family Champion Center, when they were doing their dedication and talking, that family has really no connection to SLU. I mean, they're not graduates. They've been in St. Louis for 40 years, but like they didn't go here. They've been involved, I think, in some building projects. Correct me if I'm wrong.
at SLU or in
But
St.
like,
Louis.
no, I know in St. Louis, but I think they've
Yeah.
been involved in some
Mhm.
campus projects. But
Yes.
like, it's great you can attract money like that, but you need to attract the people that went here that might one day be whales. They might be
Mhm.
minnows right now.
Yeah.
You need to
I
keep your undergraduate population more engaged with events too, but that's a completely different story.
Right.
But yeah,
I
I think shoot for the moon, but I think they're not shooting their best shot.
and I
Right.
don't think they like. I think there's a point too to connect there with the marketing of the program and fan retention, and again building these people that it even goes all the way to the point of when the cheerleaders throw out T-shirts at games, they throw it to the first 5 rows every damn time.
Mhm.
And you've got to, like, you want to build a fan base, you want to be the city's team, go up to the rafters and throw the T-shirts out up to the quote unquote unwashed masses where I'm at. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you're
What a
not the city's,
metaphor.
yeah, you're not the city's team if you're not engaging the people that are paying the bottom dollar for your ticket. To be honest, I get the impression that the athletic department just thinks that those people that pay for the cheap tickets aren't worth even talking to. Like,
I'm glad you brought up the point about like being the city's team and that stuff, because twice in the past 10 days, a member of like the St. Louis University community has explicitly said, so Fred Postello at the Champion Center dedication said, "We are the athletic program of St. Louis." And then Travis Ford at his media day press conference said, "You know, the city really gets behind us." And I strongly disagree with both of those
100%
points.
disagree.
I
Just
do
look at the
not think
press.
that I don't think SLU markets themselves as like St. Louis. I think they market themselves very independently of that. And Mizzou is always going to be number one. Like, I get it. They just have so many alumni that are in the area. But for years, a rallying cry on West Pine Bill's Twitter has been, you have to capture that casual fan, the non-Mizzou alum.
Yes.
Maybe they're not from the area. Maybe they are, but you know, they're curious about what is going on. They have kids. They want to turn them into fans. Whatever it is, you are in a metro area that has what, 1.5 million people, 1 million
No,
people.
it's
I
like
don't know.
2.8 million people.
Like,
Yeah.
you have an audience that you can market to that's in your backyard, and they're not all alumni. So do it. I mean, just
I don't mean to be that guy, but like, there are. I'm agreeing with you here for the record. There are measurable successes to getting to the NCAA tournament and winning in the NCAA tournament, including enrollment
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
and fan interest. And like, I just don't think St. Louis, and we kind of saw it with the Cardinals this season. I just don't think, and the Blues last season, I don't think St. Louis as a fan base has interest in a team that doesn't win and win at the highest level. I don't think they're patient for it.
This is going to come off as an insult as someone who's not local. St. Louis is a front running town.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we're a front running town as much as no. Let me fucking finish, buddy. You want to fight? Let's fight. No, I'm kidding. I don't think we're a front running town as much as we're just used to winning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think
that's true too.
With the Cardinals, I mean, have always won except for some time in the 90s. or maybe it was the late 80s, mid 80s. I don't remember. My mom talks about it. It doesn't matter. And then the Blues have always won at a playoff level or better, almost. The Rams, I mean, again, they were the one real exception to the rule, but
when they were the greatest show on turf, people were there.
oh yeah, and to your point, yes, they are a front running town,
and they stopped showing up when they went 8-8 every year.
Correct, but I'm saying we're not so much like we're not front runners in that like we want to. It's not like Atlanta. Like Atlanta would only show up for the playoffs. Like but the Braves, oh yeah, Braves fans, oh yeah, they were playoffs only. You think they're battling traffic in Atlanta for a regular season game? Hell no. But like we're just it's a we demand a winner or we're not, or don't talk to us. If you're not going to try, don't talk to us.
So I don't mind Pestello.
The Braves had the fifth highest attendance this year.
No, we're talking back
lower than the Cardinals, even in a terrible year. Which is crazy.
If we can like not make this about the Cardinals, like every other Ancho St. Louis sports media.
I only mean to say like it's a very specific, like if you're gonna own St. Louis and St. Louis market, okay, you have
to the point about St. Louis rallying behind the Billikens. I remember when they made the run in the A10 tournament and then went to the NCAA tournament in what, 2019, 18, yes. 19. I remember hearing about they packed Ballpark Village. They packed Fox Sports Midwest Live then. Like, that's crazy to me. I was like, wait, what? Where were these fans? Where were these people?
Well, and that's my point, right? Like, I don't mean that as an insult, my initial comment, but it's like,
right.
Like there's a degree of, okay, you need to win for people to show up. But you have such a large audience that I can't help but think the level of winning they've done in recent years couldn't have been met with better attendance if they would have sold this alleged St. Louis identity more. Like it's
the point. No, it's the point because they have plans to do these things and then they don't follow through with them.
So a few things. I don't mind Pestello and Ford saying these things because we need to have a consistent message of we are the city's team. As many Mizzou and Illini and other fans as there might be in the city, we're the only, well, I guess now SLU and Lindenwood, but
they're not in the city.
They're gonna take over.
But we're the one in the metro area. If you live central in the metro area, that you can have a season ticket to, or you can go to a game, and we're a at least high to mid level Division I team, right? So that's a fact. Now, even if you're a Mizzou fan, I'm like, we're the local team. Period. We had an ad campaign not that long ago with billboards and everything like we are St. Louis's team, St. Louis's team. That needs to be a consistent message, not just for 1 year when we've got a little more in the marketing budget or whatever. That needs to be a consistent message all the time, always. And if Pestello and Ford want to say that, even if you don't think it's true, even if attendance is down or whatever, they still have to act like it. Like never give up the posture that we are St. Louis's team. We are St. Louis University. We play in the city of St. Louis.
It's half-assed. It's half-assed.
What I'm saying is stop half-assing it and be consistent. That's all I want.
Yeah, I think we're.
I guess my issue is more so not it being said, but the lack of execution on it. So I think we're all kind of on that same page. Where it's like, look, if you're going to say this, back up the talk. I mean, you can be St. Louis's team and win 5 games. I mean, you don't need to relinquish that identity in a bad year. I'm not saying we're going to win 5 games this year, but like you need to own that, like you say. I mean, if you're going to be great, like during the Majerus years, yeah, of course, everyone's going to say you're St. Louis's team. But what do you do in those years where you're not? You still want people to identify you with that. I mean, as much as I will rip on Dayton for their stupid attendance posting, like that's where you want to be. That's what you want. You want that type of investment. And in a metro area as big as St. Louis and the St. Louis County, you can fill a 10,600 seat arena every night. And it doesn't need to be just your graduates. You have a lot of people.
Well, and the other thing is, like, we did, like, we were in top 10. You guys are too young to remember, but
yeah, when
we
they
were
played it,
nationally in the top 10 in attendance when I was a
Mhm.
kid. Like, when I be the years where I like
Yeah.
kind of became conscious as like a sports fan and really got into it and everything. We were at the St. Louis Arena, and then what was the Kiel Center, what's now Enterprise Center,
Mhm.
and for a few years with Charlie Spoonhour as the coach, we were averaging over 17,000 fans a game, and almost filling an NHL arena every night. And so, like, the fact to me now that like a 10,600 seat arena feels mostly empty is shocking. It kind of happened like during my time too. Like, it fell off during Romar for whatever reason. It was kind of a transitional time. He didn't stick around long enough to kind of rebuild a winner. Then we had Soderberg, and my senior year, his third year, we won 9 games, and it was a mausoleum in there. It was terrible. And even with Majerus, we were not selling out Chaffetz. He was there for Chaffetz, much smaller arena. We weren't selling it out.
But we
As
weren't
many
winning
people
either.
still talk about him and like him. You're right, Zach. It wasn't until his final season that we were winning. And then the 2 Cruz years, we still weren't selling out. Like, we were getting 6 to 8, but not 8 to 10. And I don't know why it's never bounced back, but we have to sustain a winner to get there. But also but at the same time, the messaging, everything else has to be consistent.
Oh.
I think you have to sustain a winner, and like you can't think of what St. Louis's team, like the St. Louis that we're talking about, is maybe already like gone in a sense. If
it's
you hear me
different
out,
now.
but I'm just saying, like the people who I would consider like in our age bracket may be already gone. Maybe you get some stragglers, but like the people you're looking at is like, as you describe yourself, Pete, is like a kid, impressionable, coming up and thinking of this as St. Louis's team. So that by the time they come to college age, they've thought that for 10 years, and they're like, well, I want to go to a basketball school. I want to go to a sports school. Where do I go? And like but to your point, you have to maintain a consistent message, because you have to nurture that student and that alumni for 10 years of consistent, this is St. Louis's team. This is what it is. It takes a decade to get this done. But I just don't think when you're on again, off again about the marketing budget or about the talking points, you don't do that. And more than anything, you have to win. And
I think you could hit the nostalgia beats. Like, nostalgia is such a powerful drug in the world.
Nostalgia doesn't do anything for
I get you.
Like,
but
we don't have it's been too long now for us.
That's what I was going to say.
Throw out a jersey that like spoonball teams wore.
But
who would that be for? Like me, but I'm 40.
That's
like I think
I'm a man.
I think the problem with a lot of SLU, and I mean it's been true for pretty much the entire length of the program, is that we've never sustained periods of success. So you always have these dead periods in there where, so maybe you would have nostalgia for a decade, but there's 4 just absolutely unwatchable years in these 10 that people fall off the train. I mean, my first 2 years at SLU, so my first 2 years were the 2 bad Cruz years. I mean, I was at SLU for like not rock bottom. I know that there were worse times in like the 70s, but like I was there for modern SLU basketball, rock bottom.
Yeah.
And most people I graduated with could not care less about SLU. You could drop a throwback uniform with the old Billiken, it wouldn't even register because they fumbled the ball and completely missed that chance to build any sort of fan investment. You go through, I mean, Pete, you mentioned that Soderberg year, the 9-win year. You know, maybe you were a student there and had some optimism, but then that year just says, well, why would I buy into this program for the next 40 years of my life? That's the really hard thing. It's hard to have nostalgia for something that's not consistently good. And that sucks to say.
We have a lot of periods where we were good for 3 years in a row, and we've never been able to go beyond that. It's always been like a 3-year kind of peak or plateau, and then it's always the other sides of that are nightmares.
Didn't I unearth some crazy stat at the end of like 2 years ago that it's like and this is going to be such a number that like is going to trigger some folks, but it's like Travis Ford won 20 games in a third consecutive year for like the second time in program history.
I think that this year,
like
because you can't count the year where it was shortened, but
Yeah.
I think that including this year, it's like the first time the program has won 20 or more games in 4 consecutive full seasons ever. Like
that's crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
Stupid
It's always 3 at a time.
Yeah.
But the other reason why that's a little misleading now, and we've circled back to our original topic that we started an hour and 20 minutes ago.
Shit so much.
But 20 wins used to actually mean something when you were in a conference that got 6 or 7 bids to the tournament. 20 wins in this Atlantic 10 doesn't mean anything.
No.
And the season's longer too.
It used to be 30 games, and now it's what, like 32, 33 regular season games.
It can be up to 33, yeah.
Plus postseason tournaments. I mean, before you might have been playing 32 games total.
Yeah, I think you can 33 or 34, I think is the max that you could have before a postseason.
I think it's 33.
Yeah, I think you're right. 33. And then you would have your conference tournament and NCAA tournament. Anyway, whatever.
But whatever it is, I will pay Travis Ford a compliment. This era is arguably, with the exception of NCAA tournament appearances, this is arguably the longest run of success this program has ever had.
It's the steadiest this program has ever been.
That's a good way.
I think that's the way to put it. Like at no point have we just completely tanked during his tenure.
That's the appeal of Travis, is that that's a great point. Yeah,
it's a high floor.
This is the year that kind of may establish that, like, as the what is the rule, what is the but like Travis doesn't, like, I mean, even in his first couple of years at SLU, those teams were not very talented, but they were there. They played, like, they weren't like unwatchable. There's something to that. That's not, great. That's not anything to celebrate, but there's something.
It's like building an aerobic base.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
totally. I don't know.
Like, Carter, it's not necessarily an accomplishment, and it's not like, it's just a thing.
Yeah,
it's an interesting. It's a data point. It's a
positive.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So this kind of gets us back to our outline, Zach.
I mean, I was just going to ask, what methods of fundraising should the Billiken Victory Fund be using?
So now we're going back there.
Because we talked about how the athletic department doesn't do a great job at appealing to the younger audiences. I mean, and if we're talking about the NIL and donor fatigue, then why are, like, if our old head donors are fatigued, let's holler at the young alumni. I mean, get the students involved, the frats involved. Like, let's moneyball the shit out of NIL. Let's get creative, get weird. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't know. When you're saying getting the frats, and college students don't have any money, so I don't know what that really means.
Their parents do.
I would be looking at
they like to party and they like beer.
I would be looking at everybody who's graduated, but like we like SLU has never been great about young alums and how to handle young alums and keep them engaged and involved in all those things. They seem to cater to their older donors. And so I'm looking at everybody else as like a huge missed opportunity there. So yeah, in terms of events, I told you guys that I liked the idea of this $250, practice meeting, behind the scenes reception. Like, I totally would have been in if I were local. It looks like it was not particularly well attended.
I can't afford it. Like, I gotta be honest. Like, I can't. I don't have the disposable income. I can go spend $20 to go watch a practice, but I can't afford like a $250 to go sit and have a conversation with Travis. Now, I'm a little different because I've done that professionally. Like, I've talked to Travis, so that's not like exactly an appeal to me. But like, I don't have that money. Like, I don't think a lot of people in my graduation bracket do.
I mean,
but my point is, so you and Zach then are talking about what would be that level, to get something out of every gettable person. If it's $25 a year from grads, in the kind of sort of
1,000
25 to,
grads. Yeah.
yeah, like that's
Mhm.
something. Okay. And then we keep moving up from there, like I'll pay 250 once a quarter for something
Yeah.
like that. So if I'm like that $1,000 a year kind of range, then there should be a plan for my range, or whatever. And then there should be a plan for bigger time donors. Like there
Yeah.
should be a scale for these things. And it just seems like so far they're making the normal calls to the normal people and having varying degrees of success. But in the meantime, like the awareness of the BVF is low. And then the outreach to anybody who isn't already a donor is just non-existent. So this was the first time that I saw them kind of do something that was at least hey, public, if you guys want to get involved, here's something for you. So it's
Yeah.
at least something, but they definitely need like a tiered to approach it as if like how do we get everybody involved? Because I can guarantee fans of Tennessee football who are in your guys like age
Yeah.
bracket or whatever, they're kicking in a few bucks where they can. I guarantee
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there are just we just don't have that in our culture yet. And I don't know why we're leaving money on the table.
I think unfortunately it might take spending a little bit of money on the athletic department side to like start building a base of donors who are used to to giving money. Like
Yeah.
that's part of it. Like the fact that as a young professional graduate of the graduate school, I don't have an undergraduate from SLU, so this might be a thing I'm not included on some things, but regardless, same
Which
thing.
would be
That like
insane, by the way.
but I've never been invited to like a young alumni meet up at a game, like have a dinner at Lorenzini's for networking. And that's going to spend a little bit of money and that's going to cost, I'm sure, but I've seen these dinners happen and they're all older.
I've never
So,
seen them.
so Carter, I will say this isn't like a graduate,
Yeah.
like undergrad. I don't think that exists
So this is a great,
Well, the
like,
for a
Billikens of the
non-Billiken club.
yeah.
Like does
Billikens
Billiken's
of
the
the
last
last
decade
that
do it?
exists. I don't know what the fuck they do.
I don't think I've ever gotten a piece of marketing material from them.
They did
Yeah.
a thing at Humphreys. I don't even remember when it was, honestly, and it didn't have
But
anything to
like,
do with Billiken athletics. It was just
but like one night a year or a quarter or a semester, invite a group of young alumni, charge them $30 for dinner, give them some stuff there that's nice. Put on the game, go to Lorenzini's, put on the game, whatever game they're at Dayton or something, right? Like at VC, a big game, get people together, get a networking event going. So you start meeting people who also like I can expletive on that, who give a fuck about this program.
have you been listening to me this
Yeah,
entire
I know,
time?
I know.
Okay.
Like I'm so not used to it. I've totally recoded my brain to like have a microphone in front of me and not cuss. But like it's like get people, and it might cost you a little bit at the start, but if you start converting these donors into people who like really give a fuck about this program, these are the people who are going to give money in 10 years and replenish your base, right? That's the way to do it. You have to organize these people, you have to bring them in, and you're gonna have to like acknowledge that like, hey, like we can't charge $1,000 a head for a plate, like
So
sorry, we just can't do it. Like
so
Yep.
a great thing, and I can't remember the year. I want to say it was like 2019, 2020, maybe. And I think it's the last time they did it pre-COVID, all that stuff. A lot of stuff never came back in terms of regional things, but it was 2019-20 because they had just won the A10 tournament. The basketball program or the athletic department hosted a preseason tip-off event in like mid-October in
yes.
Chicago. And I
Mhm.
think I attended it, and it was a very nice event. And I think about 200 people attended. It was free. All you had to do was register. But I do know that like they had an option if you wanted to donate some money to the athletic department at it. And probably 50 people donated from that. Like just a very easy, it might have been to cover the cost of their dinner. It might have been whatever, but nothing was asked for. It was just there, but it was nice. Coach talked, May talked, Costello talked. I think a couple players were with them, but it was just a nice, event.
Fred Thatch,
Yeah,
assuredly.
he might have been there. But like bring stuff like that back, and maybe it's not put on by the AD, maybe it's put on by
This
the
is
Victory
the
Fund.
Victory Fund.
But
No.
like do that in Chicago, do it in Kansas City, do it in St. Louis, and the one in St. Louis includes practice,
Do it in
like the event they just did.
Dallas.
Do it in your
in
big, yeah, exactly,
yeah.
your big regional hubs. And it can be low cost.
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. No, I mean for real.
Yes.
You'll have two people there at least.
Yes.
But like
Wisconsin.
you just
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee,
do stuff like that, and that's really easy to say, hey, my alma mater cares about me. We gotta, maybe
They
not everyone at that
don't.
event.
That's the funny thing. Is they don't give a crap. They
That's
really
the problem.
don't.
That's how you get people invest. I mean, that's how you sell your ticket packages for your MTEs, which the school has a vested interest in those being attended well. That's
Yep.
how you get people to go to the conference tournament in Brooklyn. That's how you get people to show up to your local scholarship dinners. Like all this stuff that they try and do. Athletics is a great avenue into that, and maybe partially the department has to give up some sense of it to the Victory Fund and say, all right,
Absolutely.
I give
It also
you
gives
one,
you a captive
you give
audience
me
to
one.
get propaganda.
Exactly.
It gives Troy a captive audience to get up on stage, or whoever
Definitely.
the spokesperson is, to say we need your help. Like
Definitely.
I
would love to know what that pitch was like last night, because they did say in their tweet that like Travis gave a very honest assessment of how much NIL is going to be going forward. And to me, while this event is shrouded in secrecy, because I don't know a single person that was there,
I do.
To me, that message is one that we would like to hear. And it's a question, why is now the first time we're hearing it?
Yeah.
Like that should be blasted. That social media is the closest thing to free you get. This should be everywhere
next to it. Yeah.
You're hitting something too that I think to get the initial step from I'm skeptical of the BVF, I'm skeptical of NIL in general, I'm not quite ready to give money, to getting that person over the line to okay, I'm going to support this thing going forward. A little information, right? Like give us a little, like you got to feel like you're getting something out of it.
Yeah.
Where the hell's my money going?
What
is it going
to? Right.
How is this working?
Do something that makes people feel good. Again, like you said, the dinner, like a little party, like an event, just fun. Give somebody an experience. Like again, that basketball thing is great. That's great for that price point. You get an intimate atmosphere to meet with players and Travis Ford, have a conversation. You don't have the little kids running around. That's great. But there's stuff that can be affordable to the $50 an event range. So like
it can be so much less. Imagine inviting a group of like parents and kids from the YMCA. They drop $5 in the bucket and the players sign a couple t-shirts after practice. Like
I wouldn't even charge for that. That'd be free.
But like sure, but like that's like okay, like whatever it is, like you leave a bucket and it's like whatever you want to spend, who cares?
Yeah,
but like and maybe that's the way you launder it, right? Who knows? But like but like
launder.
But like
that's
have one really big donor come in and drop like drop a band and say like, oh wow, this like YMCA reach out, okay, whatever. But like do you know
big
how many
brother, so to speak?
The amount of fans that like just like intimate player interactions can create is like TJ Hargrove.
This unbelievable.
This is why he's worth every like. I really do believe that like he's worth every social media post, whatever it is for this program, because he's so good with fans.
So
at the audience, at the stadium,
it's like that's how the ambush survived, bro.
Yeah,
that's how the St. Louis Ambush, the indoor soccer team here in St. Louis, survived, because they have guys that every night will stand there and sign autographs after the game for 2 hours, when they're making a guy like Robbie Cristo is probably making $1,000, $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Well, so, and granted, now NIL is different from the nature of true boosterism, what you normally think of it, but that whole culture is founded on two primary things: access, like proximity to the program, players, and perceived influence. Most boosters don't matter. Sorry if it makes your difference, but like, for instance, I've gone many times through a working capacity to a major MTE, and all of these boosters for all these schools come out and fly, and a lot of them are not like traditional boosters in the sense they're throwing millions of dollars around, but a big part of a lot of these MTEs is, hey, you can buy a ticket to have dinner with the players for one, like you get a banquet and like you get all this stuff. And like NIL is just an extension of that. And I agree that this event was like a great place to start. And in season, it's hard to have a bunch of these events because coaches are going to be like, look, we're practicing, we're trying to prep, we have short weeks. It's difficult. But in the off season, you can have a million of these events. Maybe you don't get access directly to the team, but maybe you have, I don't know. I mean, a
fantasy
presentation.
camp.
Yeah, a bunch of schools do those. Why
so
don't we
funny.
do those?
I'm in.
Like
I mean,
George
I'm
Mason and
I'm the
ECU.
target audience.
Yeah, like there's a lot of creative ideas that they can get that'll make people feel important and it'll make them willing to part with their money. And
Yeah.
It's just going to take
just
extra
don't do 'em.
work on the part of Travis Ford, staff, Chris May, all these people. And it's whether or not they think it's worth it to do this extra work is really the crux of the matter.
Or you hire someone, whether it's like whoever's in Troy's position or the associate athletic director of NIL to just organize. Like you hire a full-time employee so that Chris May doesn't have to think about this. He's just told, hey, we're having a dinner, you have to show up. Travis just has to show up. He doesn't have to organize all this. You hire someone to go and be like, hey, we're putting on a dinner. Can you be here at 7? Like rather than having to be like, oh, we have to find how do we work on catering and this and that. Like just you have one guy. It's easy. Like now it's not a one-man job, obviously, but the great thing about working for a university is you have an army of 18 to 22-year-olds who need internships, who need to have work experience.
Typically believe
they
in the
can
cause.
learn how to bartend.
And they're cheap. Like relative to the marketplace, they are cheap, right? Like it's easy. You'll find those are your staff. It's what we do. It's what the athletic department does for the most part already, is having a small army of active students who want work experience to help out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think my final thought really on just Billiken and NIL is get creative. Don't just be whale hunting. And, you know, if the collective or powers that be can't do something themselves, reach out, because if you don't get it right now, in 5 years, it's going to be too late.
You can't fake boosterism. It comes from the heart.
It's even more.
That's profound.
It's even more intimate now than it ever has been before, because now officially the money that you're giving is going straight to players, right? Like through this context. So it's like a even more so the things you talked about, in terms of access and influence, they matter more because you're just like I'm investing in these human beings directly. And I think that should not be lost. That sense should not be lost.
It's insane.
I like the idea of fantasy camp because I could see Zach like having one summer go live in like Reinhardt Hall, showing up at 5 a.m. for lifting. Travis is there to yell at you. Like that would be like great. That'd be like great content. Like you have to sleep in a dorm.
Okay. Now I feel like we have enough to pull that off. I just don't know if it's with basketball. Like I think we could get Kalish on board for that. I think Katie Shields would be out. Hendo would probably be on board with that for sure.
I would bet women's basketball would be on board. I think that Rebecca Tillett would definitely do something like that.
I think there are a lot of coaches who would jump at the opportunity to yell at Zach for a week.
Travis would be on the top of that list right now, right?
Yeah, that's right. You'd be running a lot of sprints.
Chris May yells at you for not attending the classes that are happening in fake fantasy week. Like, you think this is a joke?
You better get to psych right now.
Nutrition 102. You think this is a joke?
You got to maintain that eligibility.
West Pine, one thing you got into, and it really came up because of the Champions Center, is the idea of the facilities versus NIL. It's I think it's, again, we talked about it on the show quite a bit. I'm curious to get you and Carter's opinion on the Champions Center and it's kind of its true impact in your mind?
Yeah, so I definitely, and I did listen to your guys' show, whether it was this week or last week about it. And I do think that like it is a very necessary facility for most of the sports that aren't basketball and soccer. I think that it's giving
Sure.
it's giving a seat at the table facility wise, just from a locker room, study space, nutrition, that some of these non-revenue programs haven't had. I don't really know if it is a needle mover for like the big four sports at SLU, being men and women basketball, men's and women's soccer. Um, I think that it's very poor timing considering when NIL, the floodgates opened, and when this project was being fundraised for, and ground was broke and then actually built. I mean, the ball was moving. Would it have been nice to have a few $1 million that was allocated to the Champion Center for NIL for the department? Yes, but that's not how things work outside of a vacuum. I don't think it was an either or situation. I think it's a you're getting this money for a building or you're not getting anything from a lot of these donors. But I I kind of am of the mindset that buildings don't make a difference if you're not doing things right with NIL, with having the right coaches, with having a right departmental just vision. I I don't know how big of a difference the Champion Center is going to make, and that might be sacrilege to a lot of fans, but I'm not sure it's going to markedly make a difference for basketball, which is the sport that I care the most about.
I
And to
think.
that point,
Oh,
real quick, Carter, before you go,
yeah.
if it matters to basketball, it matters to every single one of your non-revenue sports. You're as an
Yeah.
athletic department, an athletic director, and the money you're spending on your college basketball program, your Division I men's basketball program, if you are a basketball only school, your non-revenue sports right now, Katie Shields, Kevin Kalish,
Mhm.
Andrea Beatty, Rebecca Tillett, they are all at the mercy of your men's basketball program. So you're not taking care of your athletes in the truest sense of the word if you're not taking care of your men's basketball program.
And
Darren told me when I was working for that 1 year with them that what do you say? It was like he told all the players, "Hey, you see this nice turf field we got? It's because basketball won a couple games. We go to games and we support that.
yeah,
Like that's why that happens, right? Like
well,
that's the money." Just sorry, I do want to just get a thought in here about the Champion Center, and that like I think it's one of those things that if you don't have it, it looks real. It looks worse than if you just do, right? It doesn't move the needle to have it. It's like there's an old lyric by a rapper who I think has been canceled. It's like having money's not everything, not having it is. And so like by not having the Champion Center, by not having these things, it looks worse in 5 years when you haven't added any facilities um to the uh to the Billiken Sports Complex. Does it move the needle on athletes? Maybe, but I think not having it and not having a private space for athletes to do these kinds of things might move the needle in to some, and that makes it worth it.
yeah, and I do know to add on that, just
Yeah.
athletes in general, like Chris May had an interview on the radio end of July, early August, where he said something to the effect of, we're at the point where when people come on recruiting visits, we can take them on a walkthrough of the Champion Center because it was basically
Mm-hmm.
done. And he said something, he's like, we're batting like 1,000 on recruit taken through here and gotten a commitment from them. Well, they were all for like soccer,
Yeah.
volleyball, all these other sports besides basketball. And I'm not saying that that's not good. Like that could be a needle mover for those other sports. And that's great. But those sports don't drive your department forward because making the NCAA tournament is tangible money in the form of credits that add up to about
Yes.
$1 million for your department. So to your effect, you win a couple games, you get a turf field for baseball. You make the tournament consistently, maybe baseball gets a stadium. It's just, I think my issue with the Champion Center is that like it has a positive impact. It just it doesn't have a $20 million impact on the department, which is what the price tag was. And
I could see that price being like amortized over
sure,
a decade and it being valuable in that sense. But like it's something that I really do like. I think when it comes to getting kids on campus, including and maybe this has all changed because of like the campus tour, impressing a kid with a campus tour doesn't have the same effect. But I think having it, it is a who's going to pay me the most. That's part of it. But I do think that if a world evolves where there's a little more transparency in terms of money, in terms of NIL, and you start having a better understanding of what is offered, having those on-campus amenities might be a tiebreaker for a lot of things. Is the Champion Center that? I don't know. I haven't been inside of it. I don't know how nice it is. I don't know what's being offered to these students. It looks great from the media photos they sent out. But like when I was in college, I wanted a place to hang out and play PlayStation with my friends. Like I don't know what that is to them. Like
yeah, and I know for like basketball specifically, just from listening to a Ford interview and some other things, it seems like the only thing that basketball is really getting out of the Champion Center is the coaches got new offices. They have a new video room, which they already have in Chaffetz. And it's like an expanded dining hall because they've always had the Chaffetz like fueling station for the athletes. So I think a lot of the basketball amenities are still contained within Chaffetz itself. Like I just don't. Yeah, you walk a guy through and say, okay, your tutoring is going to be here instead of it might have been at Monsanto and the Chaffetz School of Business and 3 other places. It seems like they've centralized tutoring as a part of it, which could be appealing because a lot of the athletes live in Grand Forest. So your entire life is basically spent within a 800-foot walking radius.
I'm thinking the same. Like how much of this is like, I wonder if there is a version of a recruit who's like, why would I ever want to go over to the Bush Student Center?
Sure.
Like, why would I do that? I don't want to like, and this is going to like reflect poorly on the rest of the student body. And I don't mean that. I'm speaking very specifically about a type of person who would want that. Like we've seen shining examples of guys who like are in class and are involved in the student community. Like don't I'm talking about a very specific type of person who's like, I don't want to hang out with the normies.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not my friend. So why would I have to go? Now I have this place where only other of my friends, essentially, that my peer group spend time here. And that might be one of those things where you go like, that might be better for retention rather than recruitment, but I don't know.
Well, and I do like
the needle is so small in the movement that I think we're talking about the
margins.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I think my last thought on it really is not necessarily like Champion Center versus NIL, but would that money have been better sent to knock down Grand Forest and build new athlete housing? I think that is something that is maybe a more interesting conversation because GFO, when I was there and I graduated 5 years ago, was not in the best shape.
It was not in the best shape 10 years ago, my dude.
Yeah. Like I just, part of me thinks, because that is a legitimate consideration for athletes and high level basketball schools and football and everything, they build athlete specific housing. Maybe the money would have been better spent there, but I don't know.
Peter, you've been quiet.
Just been listening to these guys. No, I agree for the most part. I think I'm a little more positive overall on the existence of the Champion Center. I think over time I've become more invested in the non-basketball programs and seeing them thrive. And I think this is really what it comes down to. The bottom line for me is it improves the day-to-day of everybody within the athletic department, all the coaches and players. And I think that's meaningful. Even if for men's basketball and women's basketball, and then I guess soccer after that, it really is a difference maker for everybody else in their day-to-day. And I think that's pretty cool. And I'm glad that the investment was there. But Zach and I covered this on the show the other day, and it is table stakes if you're going to compete at a higher level, which is what we aspire to do. So it's great that it's there. I think it's a necessary piece if we're ever going to make a move upward. But now I really think, it circles back to NIL. That's where we have to be competitive next. And that's really what it comes down to for me. It's like, okay, we have all the infrastructure in place. Now we need to commit to the humans themselves
Yeah.
and get that piece of it shored up. So so I thought, yeah, I think that's part two of it. And the question for me is whether culturally we're there in terms of the people who can make that happen.
Yeah, I
I
think
did have one.
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead, Zach.
No,
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 I
go,
was just
go.
gonna say that I think the worry with the Champion Center is, again, they said it on the show, is like, are you doing all of this stuff, all this building, all this opening, all this getting ready for it at the expense of your men's basketball program? And when it comes to the point that the Champion Center was pulling away your only social media guy, you know, and you're ignoring making videos for men's basketball to help get the word out, to get your team, you know, to provide a human look at your team and get people interested in the players and not just a team that might not be very good this year. You're making a mistake because you're losing people that would go and spend money at your arena and spend money on tickets. And again, it comes down to, I don't think they give a shit about the people that are paying $10 a ticket. Anyway, go on.
Oh, my only other point I had on this, and it's more of a question, but through a lot of the marketing of this, it was talked about how, this is almost a one of a kind facility where they toured other places, all this stuff, which I know part of it's a sell job and, whatever, but I do wonder, like, how accurate that is, because I would be shocked if a lot of the major Power Five and Big East programs don't have this kind of integrated in their arena or practice facility. Like, I find it hard to believe that we're one of the only schools that has this, and there's no real point to be made here, but I'm just curious how true that statement is. I don't know if you guys buy it to the same level that they sell it.
Yeah, so a lot of what we're seeing now is schools are building. This is happening at Cincinnati right now. I know it's either just happened or is happening at Northwestern, where they're building like a big football indoor practice facility, and then adjacent to that, like tied to that building, are a bunch of new offices, performance center, nutrition center, recruiting center, like all of the things that are in our Champion Center are basically attached to that. Cincinnati already has a building kind of with all of the administration offices and all of the other stuff next to the football, kind of actually wedged between the basketball arena and football stadium. Xavier's Champion Center, literally called Champion Center there as well, is a little more performance oriented. It's got a lap pool, it's got indoor batting cages, some other health and wellness stuff like that. So less in the administrative side, more in this actual day-to-day sports side. But I do think you're right. Like, this is sort of, if not adjacent, then like kind of connected or built into a lot of facilities at some of these other places for sure.
Yeah, because I do know, Chaffetz has a lot of things within it that the public doesn't see, their weight room and
Right.
all this other, their athletic training rooms and, kind of how the sausage gets made for the actual team performance part of things. But I have wondered that. I mean, is it 75 schools have something like this? Is it 10? Again, not really that important, but I do wonder through the process when we're, what we're being sold. Doesn't impact anything.
I
Either
will
direction.
say that the offices and the student facilities, like, not athletic facilities, were literally non-existent. So when they say, like, I think the sell job is entirely a sell job in a lot of ways, just because they did not have anything before the Champion Center.
Can I bring up something that I
Absolutely not.
Circled back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of like funding, and this is new to me, so stop me immediately if I'm bringing up recurring information. But on the SLU website, in the naming, they have a list of naming opportunities, Here's a list of naming opportunities for the projects, with a lot of them still like not fulfilled. Like things like the Champion Center is
Wait,
fulfilled, right?
what?
We know it's called the
Send me the
O'Loughlin.
link.
Yeah, it's just the I'll
So,
but there are
Carter,
things like sorry, yeah, go ahead.
no,
Wesley.
to build off this, someone randomly shot us a DM like, I don't know, 6 months ago, and they said that the Champion Center was not fully funded by donors. And I
Well,
think
yeah.
that ties into some of this naming rights stuff that you're talking about.
So this is what I'm saying is that there are naming rights that are committed. The O'Loughlin Champion Center, the Student Suite, Success Suite. These are all on the website
Is
listed
this
as
on
committed.
SLU.edu?
SLUbillikens.com. You go to
Yeah,
the
I was looking at this the other day too, but I was also looking at, because I was comparing and contrasting Xavier's, and their Champion Center has been open for 2 years, and it's the same deal. Like there are things that are fulfilled and unfulfilled, like it's like a wedding registry, right? Like certain
yes,
things
yeah.
are.
Where's
Yes.
this link?
So, but the point being is that, like, so if I told you you could spend $100,000 on, or I guess it'd be $500,000, which is what this site is listing, to be the naming rights sponsor of the men's basketball assistant coaches' offices, or you could spend that $500,000 on NIL. Where do you feel like you're most tangibly helping the university?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And that's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is,
But there's a price tag is all I'm trying to say. Like they've listed their prices as to what their building is asking for.
And then the fact that those are either not all filled up, or the fact maybe they just haven't updated that. I don't know what the actual status is too, is not unique to SLU. But
so I didn't want to,
Schrodinger's website update.
I do wonder how much I kind of wonder about how athletic departments themselves feel about something like the Billiken Victory Fund, because they really are competing for the same share of dollars out of a lot of people. Like if I say I can give, just to throw out a round number, if I feel like I'll give $1,000 a year to SLU athletics, that's not going to be
decal for that.
1,000 to the it's not going to be 1,000 to the athletic department and 1,000 to the BVF. It's going to be 1,000 total, right?
Yeah.
Before there was no BVF.
Yeah.
So that's the athletic department's money. So it really is like, it's difficult for them. Like, what's more important, a capital campaign versus a donation to our NIL collective.
Well, and this is the complicated thing, because like the BVF has such an easier pathway that we've talked about of getting in the $25 or $500 or $1,000 donations, whereas like there is just the percentage of people who are going to slap $50K down to create the Chapley Academic Support Office. It's non-existent, right? Like that's
right.
Like that's the whale hunting we're talking about. The people who are going to put, what's the largest naming price that's still listed here? There's one of two technologies.
Guys, I still haven't got a link. Freaking send me a link.
There's one
learn
of
how
two
to navigate a website.
I can't find it.
There's one of two. I'll send it to you here.
I'll have it in 3 seconds. Hang on.
There's one of two technology suites that's available for $1 million. Now, I'm sure part of that is funding.
Holy shit!
The actual technology, but like the men's basketball war room, $500,000. The women's basketball war room, $500,000. The graduate wall, $500,000. Like these are all things that like there's the number of actual alumni who will be giving is so few, but the BVF can take all those people who can't give that and create a pool, a pathway to giving that, to feeling like they've been part of the program for 25 years, so that in 50 years when we're rebuilding Chaffetz Arena into the SLU Twitter think tank basketball mausoleum.
Oh wait, we're killing the program. Shit.
When we're rebuilding it in 50 years, we have been felt like we've been heard for 50 years, and you're willing to give maybe a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, Peter, like a lot of this donation to the athletic department, NIL, it feels like whichever choice you choose, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. It doesn't matter which end you're looking at it, because funding the athletic department inherently provides better amenities for the athletes. It might win you some recruiting battles. Funding NIL get you better athletes on campus to use those amenities that are being funded by these other projects. And at the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game.
But
And
it's not, because if you get the better athletes, you win more college basketball games. You get the NCAA tournament more often, you make more money, right? Like, what is the pathway to winning the most games? I don't know if it's giving $500,000 to be the naming rights sponsor on the technology. So,
And unless
sure,
unless the
not.
athletic department is turning around and donating to the BVF.
which they can't. That's
Yeah, can they not?
yet,
they cannot at this time.
yet.
Well, that was my joke. Is like, hey Travis, donate to the BVF.
Yeah.
Just cut a check to Troy Robertson.
Well, this is a slippery slope, and I was going to say this when Carter was saying you're almost on the Frank Cusimano. Hey, if you're thinking about buying out your coach, why don't you put that buyout money directly in NIL and buy a team? My least favorite argument I have ever heard in my life.
So should we go ahead and dive into Travis Ford before we call it on apparently part one of God knows how many?
Do you think we can raise $1 million to be the Hall of Champions?
I want to like sponsor like a soap dispenser. Like, can I just put my name on like, or like a thing of Purell? Like, this is the West Pine Bills like sanitation station, and it's just like this big. That's what I want.
Since when is I35er the official sponsor of the men's roster webpage? How do I get that?
Wait, what?
Well, go look at the men's basketball roster page.
That I can find.
And then you'll see
give me the smallest possible thing I can sponsor for like $25. Something no one cares about.
Wait, what does the official internet partner mean?
At one point, a joke was made when they were built to me by an athletics department staffer that for a low donation of about $35, I could name the porta potty outside of the new soccer facility that would be removed upon completion of the building. So I was like, all right, we got a sense of humor here. We know what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what? What's easier to do? A $500,000 naming thing for a room, or $100,000 $5 donations for each blade of grass that sits right outside Chaffetz Arena.
I think you've just got to find again, you just sell everything. It's like, I've said this before. Why don't club soccer? Why the hell aren't you just selling 1 million ads on the jersey and subsidizing the club fund? What is SLU? Just sell everything. Why haven't we sold the Billiken Sports Complex?
The Billiken?
Yeah. What are we doing?
The Anheuser-Busch Billiken Sports Complex.
I mean, like, why though? It doesn't make sense. I mean, there's so many people walk by that, not even during Billiken basketball season. Sell everything.
Even if urinal cakes. Whenever someone takes a piss in this town, they're pissing on my face.
Even if you sold it for like way under whatever the asking price would be on a 10-year, like on a 10-year, lease, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, that would be making more money than you're making now.
And it's so funny. They find so many ways to devalue their product.
No, there has to be someone willing to pay for it. That's the other
thing.
That there has to be someone out there. Like Raising Cane's has to come up with a marketing budget to be like, we are going to spend, even if it's $1,000 a year, to be the Raising Cane's Billiken Sports Complex, right? Like, there's something to that. But
I mean, you could sell the field, for Christ's sake. You could sell you could sell anything. Like,
this is a range of things that I might not fully understand, though. It's like, I don't know if there are antiquated rules about selling sponsorship dollars on things that aren't considered donations but outright
maybe
like leasing
taxable
names. I don't know is what I'm saying. I don't know the
tax rules, but I don't think there's anything against it, right?
Like, I don't know.
I can't imagine that. I mean, from what I understand about the Dave & Buster's sponsorship, is it's just about going out and finding somebody who's willing to pay. Now, it's not exactly the same because it's not a place. And now, and SLU has prided.
This is what I'm saying. I don't know.
I think less of like rules, more as like norms of St. Louis University trying to be that ivory tower,
Yeah.
Not wanting to have a corporate logo slapped on the stadium. I don't know, but I know it's for sale. Like that, it's not for sale.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's just whether or not you would take money from, I guess, like what's a St. Louis company that's hit it big, right? Sugar Fire, I guess, is
Worldwide Technologies.
right.
No, I guess we do have that advertisement on the back of the soccer dugouts where it's like Mission Taco sponsors. So like, what's the difference? I guess, right? You're selling ad space everywhere. Like, what's the difference? I guess naming rights
Mission
is different
Taco
than ad
stinks,
space.
by the way. Sorry, dude. They got rid of my brisket burrito. I will hold it against them. Pete,
all the good locations burned down.
Pete, chime in, man. Chime in. I'm not hearing your voice enough.
No, I've got nothing to add to the naming rights. You guys you've got it.
So we're in agreement that SLU should just whore themselves out all over campus.
Whatever it takes.
That's what I'm saying.
I love this, man.
So
biggest university in the world.
Travis Ford. Let's talk about him.
He's a very nice man.
He is a very nice man.
He's been nothing but good to me.
I feel the same way about many people.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't all coach my favorite basketball team.
So where do we start here, Zach? Where do we start here?
I'm going to let West Pine Bills take over because I feel like West Pine Bills has thoughts.
Yo, let him cook.
Hold on, let him cook.
Let him cook.
That's a lot of pressure for a very complicated subject. I don't even know where to start. I mean,
would you throw in that 1920 team as an NCAA tournament bid?
No, they were not, and they were on the wrong side of the bubble.
They were close.
They were 1 win away.
They were
trending up.
They were trending up, but if they would have played in Brooklyn and lost that even if they would have won that first day, they would have had to beat Dayton on Saturday to have a shot at an at-large.
Hard to beat a team three times.
I disagree. I think if they beat Dayton, they're in.
No, well, so at the time the season ended, they were by a couple approximations between the 12th and 15th team out.
And if you beat the number 4 team in the nation, that's enough to make your resume.
On a neutral court. I don't think I can personally definitively say they were in.
They would have had to win one more game before they played Dayton, because we were on the same half of the bracket, but we would have had to beat Bonaventure first.
Which
was it, Bonaventure?
I thought it was like Fordham.
It was the winner of Bonaventure and whoever they would have ended up.
Yeah, so Bonaventure was the higher
that
seed.
game.
Yeah,
so we would have most likely played Bonaventure, and then the winner would have played Dayton. But we had won 5 in a row solidly heading into that.
Definitely, I think from an evaluation point, I look at it where the season ended. They were not a tournament team. They came on late. They were young. They were showing the right signs of progression, but they were not a tournament team. I can't award that to them. I'll start my soapbox with this. When we did the last SLU Twitter think tank, we kind of talked about program expectations and specifically with tournament appearances. And we did have a conversation that was different about Travis last year, coming into a year with a lot of hype.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we all said a baseline is that every recruiting class should make at least one tournament. I think that was kind of our baseline.
And that's looking at the old school 4 years.
Definitely. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We just made it through an entire recruit cycle. So Yuri Collins, freshman to senior year, where they did not make a tournament. And now one tournament was canceled, and we can argue 1920
the second one
placement. But the fact of the matter is you just went through a 4-year cycle and you didn't make the tournament. I don't think that's acceptable. And I know that there are a lot of very raw emotions that have been thrown around all off season, and particularly forward looking towards this season, kind of what Ford's job status should be, and if it's fair not to expect a tournament. But I think if you go 5 years in a row without making a tournament here at the money that he's making, I don't see a reason that that this should be allowed to go on for longer. And that's nothing against Travis. I think he's a good representative of the program. I think he sells the program well. He has been a head coach for, I believe this is his 20. You know what? Well, I pull this fact up.
Carter, what do you got? Well, you got something. I could see it marinating. You were ready to cook.
I want to get some like baselines on Travis Ford first before like we get too deep into like, because I do think it's important, because sometimes I think it's easy to skip over like the baselines understandings of a coach. And like first and foremost, I think Travis Ford isn't stupid. I think he's a genuinely very smart, very informed college basketball coach. I think West Pine's about to inform us that this is his like 23rd season as a college basketball head coach. Like he gets the landscape. I also think he really wants to win. I think I don't think he is like happy with mediocrity. I think he really wants to win a college basketball national championship. He really wants to be a coach that wins consistently. I don't think he wants to not be good. I think he understands, if you were to ask him, and I haven't this year, but I've talked to him in the past about these kinds of things. He understands expectations, and he understands what is expected of a program that spends a lot of money in a conference like the Atlantic 10, and understands the what comes along with that. Now, Travis Ford is also a survivor. He knows what it takes to continue on doing his job. He's been doing this for a very long time. His one big weakness is maybe he doesn't know when to get out. Things turned south at Oklahoma State. Things were, he did get out of UMass, I guess, at the right time.
He got out on an upward trajectory at UMass.
That was the one thing. Like, they
were a win away from the NCAA tournament his last year there.
Yes,
they were pretty good.
So like that. So maybe it's just a more, he's gonna stick on to what he has right now. But I don't think Travis is happy or content. I don't think if we assign like 20 wins as a barometer for success, Travis in his heart of hearts would be like, that was a really great college basketball season. I don't think he thinks that. That doesn't mean the decision makers do, or the people in other decision making places do. I think he would tell you there were extenuating circumstances and difficulties in previous seasons, but he'd also tell you that they should have won more. Like that's something I think he would tell you. That doesn't take away from the fact that everything John said was correct, or everything West Pine Bill says is correct.
You can say
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's fine.
It got bad slip.
I've almost said it 3 times now.
Yeah, I got everything West Pine said is correct. We can edit. You guys can edit however you want.
I don't care.
I doubt it. Is that at a program that spends the way it does with the expectations and builds champion centers that cost X amount of dollars, that need to win not just games, but get to the NCAA tournament and get shares in, or whatever we call it, in the NCAA tournament, needs to win and get there. And you can't have recruiting classes that don't make the NCAA tournament. That's just it's just there's no two other ways about it. It just can't happen. He had never had that before. Now he also took some teams at Oklahoma State that were in the long term, when you look back at what the Big 12 was at the time, were they getting propped up by the rest of the conference? I can't say that. I don't know. They were pretty good teams, Marcus Smart and Phil Forte, that like made those tournament runs, or that made those tournaments. Like, no idea. But he's never really done that in this high profile of a job before. And so I don't know, like, if you're seeing, I've said this before, Travis Ford is the general. Everything comes down to him. You hire a head coach to be the CEO of your program. If the program isn't producing, you need to hire a new CEO. If that's because you didn't have the right recruits, that's because of the CEO. If that's because you didn't have the right coaches, it's because of the CEO. If you didn't have the right the right NIL funding, it all comes down. The buck stops with him, unfortunately. You can't control an international pandemic that cancels a tournament with a team that is probably the best team. Well, the two best teams we've seen from him, including the 2020 tournament, and then everyone getting COVID in the 2021
Well, you want to
you might be able to assign some blame, but I think in hindsight that would be misguided considering how the rest of the world was treating things on a daily basis. Like I don't think he's different than anyone else in a lot of senses. But regardless, I'm not going to place that blame on him. That said, that's what the money is for.
Yeah, so I kind
of paid to do.
I kind of don't like the way I started out my original thing, but it's fine.
This is why I wanted to set a baseline.
Because
I think it's important to get that like those things out there that like I don't think he's sitting at home like counting his checks, being like,
correct,
man, like 20 wins is great. Like I love this. I love mediocrity. He doesn't. That's not who he is. He's not wired that way.
I have a counter to that. I will get to it in a second because it sounds very rude, and I kind of just want to throw some numbers out there objectively. He is winning 60% of his games at SLU, and that is inclusive of his first 2 years that were a complete tear down and build back up. He's 133 and 89 at SLU, which is a 60% winning percentage. He has one bid in 7 years. There were only 6 tournaments that occurred, but as I said, I kind of view that 1 year as a miss. I do concede that year that they were top 25, they got hit with a month delay. It sucks. We can do what if. At the end of the day, he didn't make it, and every coach was dealing with the same set of circumstances. They got dealt a bad hand, but there were other programs that went on lengthy breaks that still made the tournament. And it's a big what if. But Carter, you were right. He's entering his 24th season. He has 23 years as a Division I head coach. He has made the tournament in 7 of the 23 seasons, which is 30% rounded. Now, what's more interesting, of those 7 appearances, only 2 have happened at the mid-major level, which he's been a mid-major coach for 15 of those 23 years.
Are you including the Campbellsville NAIA Division I first round appearance?
I'm just including Eastern Kentucky.
I'm totally kidding.
Eastern Kentucky, UMass, Oklahoma State, and SLU. I did pose this question a while ago to our group chat that I don't think it is an unfair question to ask if he is a coach that can consistently make the tournament at the mid-major level based on his track record. But as a point you made, it depends on what he's being evaluated on. If the people that are paying his contract have different expectations than the fan base, and they are okay with 20 wins and the program, lucking into a tournament here and there, I'm not the person cutting his check, and I can't do anything about that. Now, I do have serious questions on how good this team is going to be. And like a lot of the stuff you said, it falls on him as a CEO. And I don't doubt that he wants to win. I don't doubt any of that stuff. I know he's not mailing it in. But at the end of the day, results matter. And at some point, this baseline that we've established is not enough, especially with these investment levels. And I don't want this whole segment to just be, oh, rip on him, fire him, whatever, because I think it's more nuanced than that, even though I am firmly on the side of the fence that next year I don't think he should be the coach. That doesn't mean I'm not going to root for him, root for the program, root for the players. I love it. In some people's minds on the Billiken board, that just makes me a hater because no one can maintain a critical thought. But I think it's fair to question the approach that the program's had. We've had big recruits. We had Gordon. We had Nesbitt. We had Goodwin and French only made 1 tournament. Circumstances be damned. They made 1 tournament. 2 of the best players you've had in the history of your program made 1 tournament over 4 years. we've had good transfers that never suited up for us. Was it because of some stuff that happened off the court? Yes, but again,
It's part of the deal.
who brings these players in? Who has to
Mhm.
answer for it at the end of the day? We're now going this route of international guys. I love Chris Harriman. I'm glad he's back. TBD if this is going to work out. I think
Yeah, it's fair.
we're kind of cycling through the option list, and options A, B, and C have not yielded consistent tournament appearances, which affect your bottom line. We're on approach 4 or 5, and if this one doesn't work, can any of you see an approach that works? Because it seems like
I
we're going through most of the options.
I think I've said this, and I honestly was on the side of the fence to begin this off season that I think he probably could get one more year. I thought two extenuating circumstance seasons, one
I call it
NCAA
3.
tournament. What?
Ford died. I call it 3.
That's a good
That's
point.
like it's an impossible thing to ignore.
I
Like the
agree.
stuff
I
that
agree.
like, yeah,
I've sat here and I've said that I'm shocked Travis Ford didn't take a season off or just plain
yeah.
resign.
Mhm.
And again,
I would have.
it is extremely complicated.
Oh,
Oh, it's very
just look at his
complicated.
first 2 years with what do we refer to them now as like the issue
Situation.
situation
Situation
two.
two. Come on.
Like that
You gotta,
he comes in here with that. There's COVID. There's a family member / staff member
yeah.
passes away. Like the extenuating circumstances are so complicated that it's impossible to sit here
I
and like cut
I
and dry. I think
I
we're
will
getting that.
I will say though that first one, situation two, I put that on him just like I put that on Majerus for situation one. In some ways, that's again, he's the CEO.
You're the CEO. Yeah, it's your
Yes.
job.
It's
Mhm.
the same reason why like CEOs get paid not because they do a lot of work. They get paid because they make big decisions with big consequences, right?
Mhm.
Well, and they're also, for lack of a better term, it's consequences. Put it bluntly, they're kind of a human shield where
Yes.
Mhm.
their responsibility or not, they are the face, and they
You have
are
to stand for it. Yeah.
yeah, they're going to stand for it. And I mean,
But
again, it's complicated because there's all these extenuating circumstances, but at the end of the day, you can make excuses for 359 of the 362 Division One head coaches every year.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
I don't want to make an excuse. What I'm saying is that at the beginning of this season or the beginning of this off season, I was on the fence that he should be given one more year. When they brought in Chris Harriman, I think you all kind of know that I was a little bit deeper into like, okay, now we're gonna try something different. I want to see. I want to see. It wasn't necessarily we need to make the tournament. It was okay. Let's see what happens with these young guys. Like, what can we build something? Can we start from scratch and
Mhm.
build something? Am I seeing a team that could make the tournament in 2 years? Now with the farce that has kind of been this offseason, you're talking about Nolan decommitting,
Mhm.
Brock Weiss decommitting, Ezewiro's waiver taking God knows how
Mhm.
long. I just I want I this team has to make the tournament. Like they're barring a miracle, I'm not sure Travis Ford should be the coach next year.
so I do kind of want to circle back to something, and I'm glad you brought up like Vice and Nolan specifically this offseason. So earlier when we were talking NIL, we said, maybe a reason we lost out on those guys is someone got in their ear, might be able to get
Mhm.
some money somewhere else. I still put most of the blame on the staff there.
Yeah.
That you had these guys locked in, and as much as it sucks, you got to keep them engaged until the day they step foot on campus. And then you got to do it for 4 years if they're a
Mhm.
freshman or however long they're going to be
Well,
here.
Well, part of that is whatever went on with why Phil Forte felt the need to move laterally back to Texas this year of all years is part of it. Like there will be reporting done on it, I'm sure one day, whether it's on the record, off the record, whether we can bring it to light on this podcast or not. It happened this offseason at a weird time after the recruiting class didn't make the tournament. And he, as we learned, he was critical to the recruitment of most of our marquee recruits and transfers at the beginning of the season, and then all of a sudden takes a lateral job to, and I guess like I don't know the like culture dynamics of like what lateral might mean. Like he might have a higher ranking position in that staff as an assistant.
Yeah, I think
But then
I think he's a chair up on that staff
but
because he
like
was the last assistant here.
yeah,
So I'm pretty sure he's in the second chair now.
but like and maybe that's not something I totally understand, but like could you not have found some cash to, and like second, like wouldn't he have become the second chair after before Will left? Like
Well, Will left after
Was
Phil.
it Travis
so
Ford's? Was it Travis Ford's decision, or are we
these are
attributing it? Are
this
we
is all
attributing?
yeah.
Are we attributing it to the
Sorry.
conjecture of the alleged coup attempt?
Oh, I see. I can't do any reporting on that, so I just don't. I just
So
don't.
I I've maintained for a few months that the perspective of why the staff changes happen this offseason depend on if you are like what side of the fence you are in terms of Ford. I think that if you're in the camp that he needs to go, that these guys jump ship. And then if you're in the camp that he needs to stay, whether there was some attempted coup or whatever, is that he was telling guys, hey, I kind of want to reshuffle my staff. I'm going to help you find a new opportunity, advance your career, whatever. I think it really depends on perspective of which camp you sit in, and that the truth might be somewhere in the middle. I don't know.
Like, I mean, you're talking pressured to switch up his staff, or
I think a bit
hey,
of
like I mean, because I think there's probably 5 different explanations, right?
sure.
There's Travis Ford realized they screwed up this past season. One more year. Hey, my guys, go find something better so you're not on a staff that gets canned, right? In 1 year, whatever. There's Travis Ford is pressure, or the administration is pressured to get rid of Ford. And and these are all alleged scenarios, by the way. When I'm saying alleged, I actually mean I'm actually just speculating. There's an attempted coup in which the compromise is a staff shakeup. Now, it could be that that Travis Ford just felt the need to shake up his staff. It may have been a directive from the athletic director, not involving a coup. So there's a lot of things here.
Yeah, and that was kind of my point, is that I don't think we'll know until Travis isn't here.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be all right, the dirty laundry can come out, so to speak. And at the end of the day, I guess that's a good place to switch to, like, in the context of Travis and his tenure and whatever, like, with how this offseason shook up, I like the hire of Harriman. I like the hire of Charles Thomas, right? Not Carl. Carl's his twin.
Carl's.
Okay. Like, I like those hires.
Pete's a man of few words in this show.
I don't
Just
necessarily
waiting on my
know.
turn.
I don't necessarily know how I feel about this offseason as a whole for recruiting, because I think I would have preferred Vice and Noland over some of the guys we got later in the cycle. And like pretty firmly, I think I would have preferred those guys. Which, no offense to who we got, but
They're known commodities more so.
I don't have a lot of faith in this incoming group, especially this week.
It's also a matter of like perhaps the story on Brock Weiss became a little more popular because of where he ended up afterwards. Like maybe his, I think people who are in touch with, the recruiting staff and stuff like that, and had a sense of the type of player Weiss could be, had a sense of it. But then it's easier to quantify what you lost after he ends up at a Big East school immediately after decommitting from you. Like if that's a recruit they want, we should have had him. So they're known commodities more so than what we have currently. Because like that's the thing when people ask me about this team. Like I went on Matt Pauly's radio show, I don't know, probably a week ago. Yeah, just over a week ago, and he asked me like, what do I expect of this team? And it's like I don't have an answer. I don't know. Like Travis is right at media day. Like how can you possibly know? Like this is and even more so. Like this is a group of players that they aren't high profile transfers coming into your program who have done it at the college level, and you can kind of watch tape and be like, I know who these guys are. It's a lot of guys who had limited minutes at smaller programs, or are international, or are fresh, or are high schoolers who knows how that translates. Like Yuri Collins came in and was a starting point guard in his first year. Was he perfect? No, but he was a very serviceable starting. Gibson Jimerson in that first semester window looked like a very serviceable rotation piece off the bench, which could have grown into more.
He looked
I
like a
don't.
peach too.
He did look like a peach. It still does. But like we didn't know that was going to happen, but we had the backbone of Jordan Goodwin and Hassan French to kind of carry us there. And now you're kind of like, I have no clue what we had.
And I think a two-part thought I've had is that I think the big problem is, in evaluating Ford as a whole, is that in year 8 of a coach, you should not have these questions. And
you should know the identity of the program.
It's very clear to me that they put all their chips in on last year, which I don't think is a stretch to say, and that they thought a big year was going to propel them to NIL dollars and good recruiting, and did not have a proper pivot when they did not meet expectations after coming in with top 25 hype. They never reached it, but they were receiving votes, and they didn't even make a postseason tournament. They didn't. They put everything on black, and it came up red on the roulette table, and their entire bankroll was gone. And I'm not certain that they're smart enough to. And that sounds rude because, again, Travis isn't an idiot. I just don't know if they have the ability to bounce back from that, or to know to walk away from the table, as you kind of said earlier.
This whole episode has been about money, more or less. Like we've barely scratched the surface with recruiting, with players, with the A10. We haven't talked about at all what the season's going to be like. I mean, like none of that. We were just talking about money, really, and like how it relates to the program. And the thing we're not acknowledging in a conversation about Travis Ford is he's making $2.5 million a year, and he either has $7.5 or $10 million on a buyout, depending on how many years you think he has left on his deal, depending on what you believe about his contract. And we've heard a lot of different things about what that might actually be. But I think at the very least, it's $7.5 million after this year. And so it's not necessarily up to, certainly not us, but anyone in terms of like, is it feasible to even let him go after this year? Because not only are you going to have to buy out what's left on his contract, you're going to have to pay another head coach a good amount of money. And even if he's not going to make everything that Travis did, you're going to have to pay another head coach and give him a 5-year deal or whatever to get him on board. So you're committing a lot of money. And that's going to be the people bearing the brunt of that are the same people who were paying for the Champion Center, who were asking to open up their bank accounts for NIL. That's a big uphill climb. We're talking about, for NIL, you want to get $910,000 a year roughly to fund 13 scholarships. That's a fraction of what Travis, that's about a third of what Travis is making in a year. And we're like, oh yeah, we're just going to buy off his contract. If that's got 3 or 4 years left, that's how many years of NIL? That's
crippling.
7-8 years of NIL right there that we're talking about. And that's before you pay for a new coach. So I think everybody needs to keep that in mind as we're talking about what his future is, because if I'm looking at that reality, I'm going, we've committed to this guy, right? So let's let's worry about the other aspects of our program in the meantime. Because I think like we're going to have him. I think it would take an absolute disaster, and not just a disaster this season, but a disaster that inspires an alum who's willing to burn set well into 7 figures, if not 8 figures, to fire one coach and hire a new one. And I just don't know how realistic that is.